Okay, now you're live.
All right. Good evening, everybody. It is 6 p.m. on February 16th, 2021, calling to order the meeting of the Southborough Board of Selectmen on that date. And first is the governor's intro. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Southborough Board of Selectmen will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and a requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to participate or watch in the meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. All right, with that, hi everybody. The entire board is in attendance. So again, we're called to order. The first order, well, the second order of business will be public comment. The first order of business is we have some special observers tonight. A number of Southborough teens who are in the process of working towards their various merit badges. With the goal, presumably, of trying to become Eagle Scouts, are in attendance. Community engagement, community participation, becoming better versed in how town government on up works is a big part of the Boy Scout experience. And so they are, we'll see if they want a public comment at any point. They can do so like anyone else. But I think their primary function is going to be to observe, at least at the Board of Selectmen level, how town government functions in the town of Southborough. So welcome all you Boy Scouts out there in cyberspace. Nice to have you.
Thanks, Mark.
And with that, our first item is public comment. And I'm looking, I do not see any hands. Going once, going twice. All right, next, schedule appointments. I believe Mr. Ballantyne and Ms. McAuliffe are going to be brought over for discussion about the current state of the FY22 budget. So Vanessa or Katie, if you can take care of that, that'd be great. Hi, Brian.
Good evening.
Hello, Carla.
And good evening.
All right, who is gonna take the lead for two things? Number one, with select person Malinowski was very involved with our quarterlies. Am I right about that, Chelsea? So would you want to do that first and then go to the budget update? All right, so Chelsea, are you going to take the lead, Brian or Carla? No. That was a quick shake of the head.
I mean, I can if you want me to, but Brian and Carla did all the work. So
Okay. No, I'll start at least. How about that? And
okay.
I think we can roll through both of these issues pretty quick. So I know you got a busy night, and it's a short night. So we did the quarterly report through 12/31/20, and we've sort of tried to make this now a set sort of procedure that we do where we break it up into revenues and expenses for the quarter. And, you know, we kind of hit the highlights, and then we hope that if any of the board has questions, you know, obviously you can ask now, but, you know, any detailed questions probably offline at some other points good, only because of time considerations and all that. So, the revenues, I'll take the revenue side real quick. The revenues were pretty stagnant, I'd call it, overall. As you can see from the bullet points, we're about 35,000 less than last year. I think the big thing that happened this quarter was we did find out actually it's this quarter now. We did find out what the first billing of the excise commitment is going to be. And it's about 125,000 lower, which is about 6%. And I'm hearing that's about fairly common in other communities right now. Not too nervous about it yet, because the second commitment's pretty big too, and we've seen them swing before a little bit. So we usually get a little inkling, and then we get a better inkling on that second commitment. So we'll keep an eye on that. I think the big takeaway is that I think the revenues, I was fearful they were going to be actually more impacted this year, and it seems like we're just going to be more towards being stagnant, which is unfortunate, but it could be worse. So that's a good thing. The water fund, obviously, I think we mentioned this last quarter, had a large increase due to the rate structure being revisited. So we'll continue to look at that. We're actually going to look at that in conjunction with some of the capital items being proposed for next year that are going to be through the water fund. So we'll be looking at that. More to come on that for certain. Before I turn it over to Carla, since that's my quick thing about revenues, I'll just mention we have gone through some of the departments for the remainder of the year, and most of them are on track to be within their spending. We know there's a few exceptions. I did want to mention benefits because it's a large budget, and we had talked about that with Carla and Miss Malmuski when we went through this. So benefits doesn't look like we're going to return a lot of money this year. It's a big budget, so sometimes if things roll right, you can have a good amount come out of that for free cash. Unfortunately, it looks like we're going to be very close this year to expending somewhere between 98 and 99% of it. So I just wanted to mention that since we are keeping an eye on that. And since we're talking about benefits, I will share a little bit more good news that we got the rate hold for the health insurance recently, but we also just got notified we got rate hold for the dental piece too. It's not as big. It only made a difference of about 30,000, but great news. So on that note, with the good news, I'll let Carla speak to just some of the high level expense stuff, and especially I know you probably want an update on the CARES and FEMA. And I know she's been working diligently with that stuff for the last many, many months. So I'll turn it over to her for her comments.
Hi, good evening. I'm here to talk about the revenues and the next CARES application. We did send an email to our contracted services vendors to just have them bill us timely to try to keep up with our, in an effort to keep our expense ledgers current through the year. For the highlights of the departments, the town clerk, we actually moved out about $8,600 of election expenses due to COVID into the CARES and FEMA funds. And then in February, we also received another grant for $2,400. So that expense moving out of the general fund is not reflected in this current quarterly report, but will be in the next one. And that was actually just to use for salaries for early voting. So that's easy and very straightforward. That'll be another $2,400. The Board of Health, we've actually moved out $24,000 from the general fund into CARES and FEMA. They received an additional grant from the Department of Health for $65. We moved those out of the report. That's reflected. And in January, they received another $54.96 as a residual portion from the Department of Health. So that will be again in the next quarter. We did receive some CARES money that we didn't apply for postage, which was great. And that is going to affect the town clerk and actually the Selectmen's budget as well. It'll be split between the two, and that'll be $1,800. DPW, not so good news. The trash and the recycling this year, trash is high and recycling this year we're paying for. So the overall line is forecasted to be $62,000 over. Karen is going to strive to cover that within her budget, but she will request a reserve fund transfer if necessary. So we're keeping an eye on that as well as a few other lines in DPW. An update on CARES and FEMA. Actually, Neil and I will be working with FEMA. At the end of the month, we're going to be filing another round with FEMA. And again, with the switch in administration, they've changed the rules again about what's eligible out of which bucket. So, there's, no flies on us. We're trying to keep up with that. The CARES application is actually due next week. And I'm going to be putting in another $61,000 for CARES. And basically it's made up of our rent and mortgage assistance, which was about $13,000. And we had a good amount of formal FEMA denials. We did put in a FEMA app and we had a lot of back and forth with them. And they refused 39,000 of our charges, which is okay because we can use it for CARES. So again, with the changing rules, they just like to make it fun for us. So between the two applications for CARES, that'll be a drawdown in total of $117,000. And the school just sent me a bill that I can't claim now, but it was for $87,000 for testing. So that will be in the next round. When available in the next drawdown window, I'll draw that down. So the reserve fund transfer right now has several potential transfers being tracked. The antenna repair at the public building, the public safety complex, a few DPW overages, and a potential for Board of Health expenses. Additional information on these will be available next quarter. And again, we're keeping an eye on them. So that's all on expenses.
Carla, I'm going to go to you in a second, but just a very quick question. You mentioned that $39,000 was, we got a no answer, but that it then was able to slide into the CARES bucket. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes. Yep. Once we get a formal denial from FEMA on any expense that's COVID related and fits the bill, we can potentially send that to CARES and CARES will cover it at 100%. It's happening to every city in town. Due to the rules kind of changing midstream, we had projects in with FEMA at the time. So we've gone back and forth and justified this or that, and they denied those 39,000. But again, we have the CARES as the other federal funding source.
How is the track record going generally in terms of, in other words, are there many, if any, expenses that we have requested payment or reimbursement for, either through FEMA or CARES, that we've got an absolute no, basically that the town has had to cover itself, or is it 100% at this point?
Well, for FEMA, the process is we apply and provide all the backup, and they do their auditing up front. CARES, we actually apply, they give us the money, and then they do their audit after the fact. So if it's kind of an outside of the box or doesn't really fit the potential uses exactly, I email the folks at the state, the CARES people, before I send in and include that in the application. So I'm trying to, cover us on the CARES side, because again, they can come back. But FEMA, once they, give us the money, we're good, because we provide all the paperwork for them for those applications up front.
Okay. And is there a general timetable for the auditing work that CARES is doing, or is it just catch as catch can?
Well, I've heard from some towns they're now doing desk audits, like randomly for certain towns, where they ask for, a sampling of your invoices to be sent to CARES, but there will be a compliance audit at the conclusion of CARES. And right now the deadline got moved out to 12/31/21. So I'm assuming the compliance audit where they dig deep and everything is going to take place after that.
Okay, great. Ms. Braccio.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Brian and Carla, and thank you so much for all that you've done. I only have a couple questions. I'm going to try to keep them brief. If I think that one I think may have a little bit more discussion, and I'm happy to address that offline with you. One of the questions I have is on the DPW, and this is more towards Mark and Brian, I guess. Based on recycling and the shortage that we're finding, and if that's going to be trending going forward, how are we addressing that in the fiscal year 22 budget? Or are we not?
Well, no, we definitely are. Karen's actually going through and redoing her water budget right now. And I think as part of that, she's going to be looking at the, to make sure that FY22 looks solid. So I guess the quick answer is I can't guarantee her budget may not change again because it is significant, but I don't know yet.
Okay, fair enough. So to some level, we're looking into it and potentially accounting for it in 22. Okay.
Correct.
The next question actually is for Mr. Purple. On the Board of Selectmen deferred compensation, we ran over on that and we're only 6 months into the new fiscal year. Do you anticipate that overage being higher, or what is the overage?
No, that overage, that's once a year. I'll defer a little bit to Brian on that. That's because that's calculated based on the contractual obligation of it's a percentage of base. So that usually is pretty spot on.
Okay, so Brian, you didn't anticipate that changing over the next 6 months?
No. It won't change over the next 6 months. And I think it's solid for FY22. I'm not sure why FY21 was a little off.
Okay, well, these are easy so far. And my last one is, and I know that we had discussed this prior, the contracted services for the DPW. In looking at, I know that we condensed them, kind of are doing them all out of one account, but as I went through, I don't show a whole heck of a lot left for the next 6 months. Do you think, are you forecasting that we may run into a shortfall for fiscal year 21? And again, if so, are we looking to address it in 22, or do you think we're okay?
I would say we're again, I guess I'll reiterate that we're still looking at it for FY22. But her budget's going to be tight and this year. And if you know the DPW director, you know she's very on top of her money, and she's going to want to cover as much of that deficit as she can. So I suspect, and this is probably a follow-up conversation with Karen, but I suspect she's going to have a very, very tight last 4 months of the year. So I know she's probably not going to try to not spend except for, things she really has to spend for. But that's definitely a follow-up conversation with her. Okay. So yes, your answer is we may have to revisit that at town meeting for some funding.
Okay, and my bigger concern on that is just making sure for fiscal year 22, she has what she needs, so we don't run into a deficit on that. And based on all this, I just want to thank you for, continuing this process. And, it shows us a lot of things going forward as we go into the next budgeting season as well. It brings up areas that we may find that we may have to increase or it's needed. So I appreciate the exercise, and that's all from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Mrs. Malinowski.
I'm all set. Thank you.
All right. I kind of figured that might be your position. Brian.
Thanks. So I guess similar to Ms. Braccio, the question I have, not more so on specifics right now, but how it looks and carries forth to the FY22 budget. From the revenue perspective, do you see, and maybe this leads into the discussion on the budget, if we want to wait until then, that's fine. But do you see adjustments that you need to make on the revenue side for the FY22 based on where you see revenues finishing for this year? I mean, no, we're probably halfway through Q3. So we're starting to get closer to the end. Do you see any adjustments that we need to make, or are we okay on that end?
So and just probably most of the board will recall this, but the revenues are actually technically set during the recap process in the fall. So that's a good thing in a way, because it gives you time to see how the year closed out and everything. So, it obviously directly impacts the tax rate when it's set. Right now, I would say there's some ups and there's some downs and all arounds, but there's not enough to justify really either way yet of touching them in either direction. You could pick any one category and probably make an argument to either lower them or raise them, but I think for now, the wise thing is we're going to hold firm for a little longer and see where we end up.
Thank you.
All set, Brian?
Yep.
Mr. Stires?
Thanks. Again, thanks, Brian and Carla. It's very helpful to have this report periodically to sort of get a better look at what's going on sort of inside the numbers. So keep up the good work on that. I do have a couple of questions. One, I read a recent story in the news that the state has $2.7 billion of CARES Act money. And of that, $502 million is designated for cities and towns. And the story I saw sounded like there's an actual specific number allocated to each city and town because people were scrambling to get their full allocation spent. And I'm wondering, do we have such a number, and what is that number, and how are we doing against whatever that number is? Because it sure sounds like there's a very specific plan in place for how to spend that 2.7 billion or the 502 million of it.
I did hear the higher number, but I'm going to defer to Carla on the specifics of our town because I'll be honest, I didn't hear that number. So,
So Sam, this is in addition, like a round two kind of thing for CARES in addition to the amount of money from the spring?
I'm not sure. I thought it was for the first one, but I'm not positive. The Globe had a story on it a few days ago, so it might be worth a call to the governor's office or someplace there, DOR, to find out, because there were cities and towns that were scrambling to get all of their allotment spent fairly quickly, it sounded like. So I'm not sure of the exact timing, but it would be useful, I think, to know, if we do have a number and how we're doing against it, and
Okay.
to make sure we use whatever we can use out of that.
We've kind of been getting information from the FEMA side of things.
Okay.
FEMA now is going to be covering vaccination clinics at 100%. And we also saw something with FEMA that any expense that they've already approved going forward, they're going to approve it at 100% instead of the 75-25 split.
Mm-hmm.
A&F, the Advisory and Finance at DOR, I'll reach out to them and see. They've been really kind of silent ever since they said the extension is open, but they haven't really sent us much information. So I'll follow up on that for sure.
You might check out the news story. I would just feel it would be disappointing if we have a number. Yeah, last week somehow there was a Globe story about towns scrambling to spend. It sounded like people were getting reimbursed for a wide variety of things through that. So it's the kind of thing, if we don't ask, maybe it sort of disappears or something.
Yeah, right.
I urge you to be very aggressive about finding out what's going on there.
Yeah, it's worth questioning. And we were sent that CARES money. Jim Haggerty was, surprised because he didn't apply for any kind of postage reimbursement or anything. So I don't know if they're doling it out to cities and towns and dribs and drabs or whatever, but I will check that out. Thank you.
I don't know. And the Globe article listed several towns who are actually in the hunt for that. So might reach out to one of them or two of them to say, hey, what are you doing? Where did you get your number?
Yeah, sure.
Lead to follow up. So, and another question, this is maybe more for Lisa and or Chelsea. Mentioned the mortgage assistance program. Is that something that actually got renewed? It went till December 31st, as I recall. Do we have more money for that? So we are doing that again during 2021 here? And if so, how much do we have for that?
So Carla, I believe in next week, is applying for the program that ran through December 30th of last year. And it is something that I haven't talked to Carla about yet, about renewing and opening up another period for that. But Sam, I guess the question would be for the trust is we haven't gotten confirmation that the 13,000 is covered from CARES. So if it's not, we have the trust as the backup. So, you know, we allocated 25,000 as the backup from the trust. So I guess if we stay within 12,000 on round 2, then we're covered. In case it's not reimbursed, I don't see why it wouldn't be.
Okay. But we could expand the backup from the trust if the trust committee so chooses. But it's the intent to actually extend that program, because I think that there are a lot of people out there who are still suffering.
I agree.
So,
Yes. And so
good.
that
Okay.
I will be talking to Carla about
Okay.
that.
Good.
Yeah, and we have talked about that, Sam, on how we could possibly do it and the parameters
Good.
that we would want to maybe change things up a little bit to go forward with that. So make it a little bit easier.
Good safety net, particularly again if there's funding out of CARES for that. So okay, thank you. That's it for me, Marty. Thanks.
All right, great. Now to the item small double I, the budget, FY22. Is that you, Brian?
That'll be me. So I will just give a quick status. So as the board knows, we started this process a few months ago at a pretty daunting tax rate, and no one was really happy about it. We're down to about, just because of the recent developments, with dental and the schools, we're down to about just over 6% right now. So there's a big improvement. Still got a ways to go, but that's real progress there. So the departments have mostly, almost all of them, resubmitted their budgets with the personnel board vote. So that should be wrapped up by the end of this week. So the budgets will be that we're carrying are now like accurate budgets as far as raises and any kind of increases and all that salary stuff. And we're still going through capital a little bit, as some of you are aware. So we're gonna see where that ends up as far as recommendations to, from the capital committee to the selectmen, and we'll go through that at the appropriate time. I'm trying to think of what else. The schools are still talking as far more the regional, I think, at this point, about their budget, and I think that's going to carry on a little longer. But that's kind of what just the real big picture where we stand. So we're refining, we're getting to the point where things is coming into a little bit more focus. So I'm hoping that, in the next week or two, we'll be at a point where we can really take a look at the budget, and the board can decide what to start, what they would like to start supporting, not supporting, suggesting, and get a feel for how we can move forward to town meeting. So I'm cautiously optimistic. It's good news that we're down to like I said, right around 6%, and hopefully we can drive that down a little lower to a palatable number to bring forward. So that's basically where that stands for now.
All right.
And I'm happy to send out the form again to the board, because it has changed a little bit since, I think last week was when I sent it. I can send that again to the board for, so they have the most updated version.
Okay, why don't you do that? And I don't know, Brian, you're making a pretty good case for us to stay out of your hair. Every time we talk to you, we started at 9.5 and we're down to 6. Maybe we should just stay out of it for a little while longer.
Gets a little harder as you go on, but that's okay.
Yeah, no, I understand. No, but appreciate the effort to get us where it appears to be right now. I'm not going to delve into any specifics. It sounds like anybody else interested in diving into any of the specifics, or Chelsea?
I just had one question, if Brian could comment on it, related to the fees for the departments. I know that advisory was asking for us to look at fees. So Brian, do you mind just giving a quick update on that?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. I meant to mention that. Sorry. Good point. Yes, I did reach out to the departments, and that's another thing. I've gotten almost all of them. I got a couple more today responses. So I'm going to compile that similar to the exercise that, we did with the budget. So I'm going to send that to you. In fact, I'll probably send it to you either this week or the beginning of next week. So you'll have that. You can look at it. I don't think there's any huge surprises. Just to kind of give you a sneak preview, so I'm surprised, pleasantly surprised, by the way, that a lot of departments do have a regular review of their fees. I kind of thought some of them might let it slip and they don't really look at it, but a lot of them do. So I was really happy about that. So, but when I get that, I will definitely send it to the board, and definitely another talking point that we can go through.
All right, anyone else? Yeah, Sam?
A couple of quick things, if I may. Thanks for the big picture version, Brian. I've got a very tiny picture version here. Question, I've seen some correspondence around this internet connection to the History Museum, and apparently the Historical Society has volunteered to pay for the equipment there. That's like $1,200 a year that we could actually save there. Is anything going on with that, or are we still looking at that, or do you know where that stands?
Yeah, that was something they first talked about. Obviously, Tom was involved in that.
Right, yeah.
And then and Mark can correct my memory, or Carla actually might remember too, when we sat down with Miss Battles. I thought they put some money in their budget to make that happen next year. Am I wrong about that? And it wasn't a whole lot of money, but I thought she did.
Yeah, the equipment was a couple $1,000 or something like that, and that apparently is covered now. So I don't know. Again, point is, I think that's something that's worth following up on the tiny scale here. Every dollar counts, so it'd be good to keep that moving if possible.
I could be getting it wrong with signage too. She's had some historical signage that it wasn't a lot of money, but I could be mixing it up with that. I'll follow up on that too, Sam.
I thought it was internet, Brian. I thought she saved on internet or something.
Yeah, that's what they're going to stop paying.
We'll have to revisit it.
Yeah, it was the connection.
Comcast.
Yep.
All right, well, it sounds like, Brian, you're going to track down and see what the status is. Okay.
I have one bigger picture issue that's not directly in the budget, but something I think that's worth sort of keeping on the radar screen. We just got our FY22 assessment information from MWRA on water rates, and those are going up significantly for Southborough. Which actually flows through the water fund. So it's not direct budget impact, but it's something that'll affect the taxpayers. The issue is that it's a zero-sum game for the water MWRA budget. Boston has used significantly less water during the pandemic as people have closed offices down. And so Boston is paying a whale of a lot less in FY22. That means that money is covered by the various towns. And Southborough actually has used more water to water lawns and all that kind of stuff. So the suburbs get whacked on that one to cover the overall MWRA budget, and people are scrambling to figure out how that works. And for us, we can, again, through the water fund, pass it along to the water users, but that will be something that affects people, and we need to keep an eye on that one. So that's sort of FYI as opposed to direct budget impact.
And that definitely fills in a little bit of the puzzle why I mentioned Karen is looking at her water budget again. That's a piece of it. So
right,
good
our
point.
Water cost will go up significantly next year per
right.
gallon or 1,000 cubic feet or whatever. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Okay, I don't see anybody else indicating. All right, Brian and Carla. And Brian, I guess I am going to see you on, is it Thursday morning?
Thursday, nice and early.
For the one I missed last time?
Yep,
yeah, I'll be there this time, I promise.
Okay.
All right. All right, thanks very
much.
Thank
you. Have a good night.
All right, you all too.
Thanks.
All right, reports. Because the next two items are scheduled. So let's see how much we can get in before 7 o'clock. The first report, and this is just a heads up, I guess through Mark, I'll reach out. One of the other requirements for the merit badge, the community participation, community government merit badge, is that the Boy Scouts are required to interview a member of town government. And so rather than having been through this before, I always often end up being the one who doesn't quickly enough take a step back, although this sounds like a pretty enjoyable enterprise. So I'll reach out to folks, and we'll get, for the Boy Scouts who are out there, we will get a name to you in short order for an interview, so you can push along your project.
Marty, can I just nominate Brian for this? I think this is, he's the senior member of the board, and he, being that it is, we don't know if he's going to pull papers again. I think it would be a great opportunity.
That sounds good to me.
See, I was being a nicer guy. Lisa's not as nice as me. I was gonna. So, what do you think, Mr. Shea?
And I even tried to move my chair back as to not step forward. Sure, I'm more than happy to do it.
All right,
I think you would do a great job, Brian. That's all. That's why.
I'm sure you would. I'll forward you the email from the Scoutmaster and then leave that to you. All right.
Sounds great.
And that was not coordinated between me and Lisa, even though it worked out. One less item I have to worry about. All right, the update on the shared streets and the spaces. I mean, obviously that was in our packets. I think it's really exciting. Mark and I, as well as Karen and representatives from VHB, the consultants, participated in a meeting with some representatives of St. Mark's last week. And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't come away with anything other than encouragement that everybody is excited about the potential for this project. The one thing that's interesting about it is that it has got a drop dead date for spending the money of the end of May. So the process is very much fast tracked. I think Karen is looking to get some RFPs out in very short order, maybe the end of this month, the beginning of March. And so if anybody else wants to comment on pretty detailed drawings, they were actually some additional ones from the ones that we had during the course of the meeting we had with VHB and the St. Mark's representatives. Again, very exciting for a pocket park, a small park directly north of what is now the library parking lot that will have some recreational for young children. It'll be a sitting area for young and old alike. It's going to have some garden and other areas. Again, it's going to be, I think, knock on wood, it works out with the $290,000 grant we got, and a terrific addition to the town. If anybody else wants to comment, just show me your hand and weigh in. Yeah, Lisa.
Hi, Marty. Thank you. I think it's a great project. I just have a couple questions. I know that there's a playground, and I was just curious about that, where we have a playground at Woodward. We have a playground just redone next to the townhouse. I mean, was envisioned as a play space? Do you know if the vision is a playground, and if structures or whatnot for that are included in the grant, or is that outside of the grant?
I think all of that would be included in the grant. And in fact, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong on this. I thought the idea was to move some of it from what exists right now in the townhouse parking lot. Am I wrong about that?
No, I think the thought is that some of that, you're correct on the first part about moving. And the second part, I believe the thought is that maybe some of the equipment at South Union, depending on what happens there, Lisa.
Okay, so I'm just going to give a caution. The only playground on the south side of town is at South Union. So before we consider or really look to move those structures from there, I think we need to make sure that there's something else that's offset on the south side is all.
All right, good point.
And then my only other question was, and I voiced this before and I'll just voice it again, is I'm concerned about, there's a lot of mature trees down there that have a lot of history that make up our downtown. So I guess that's more of a Karen question to kind of go through this a little bit with me. I'd like to know which of those trees are coming down. And I would have a concern if it was all of them. And I know how much you love trees, Marty, so.
Well, I will tell you from the I mean, there wasn't a tree by tree discussion, but very much the tenor of the discussion was that the existing landscape was going to be maintained as much as it possibly could, and that the new plantings, the new infrastructure was going to be worked around that rather than sort of a whole scale, let's knock stuff down and start anew.
Okay, no, that's great. I appreciate that. Thank you. And again, I think it's a great opportunity for the town. So it's definitely a win. Thank you.
All right, I guess that is it for that item.
I'm sorry, Marty. I just had a question and a comment on that one. Back to the playground, the other consideration is the South Union School playground is the only fenced-in playground in town, which is important for people who have multiple children running around. So I just want to make sure we're aware of that. And then how much is this costing? So the grant's for $290, and then there's Chapter 90 money that we're using as well. And is everything in the plans included in the 290, or do we know kind of the breakout of that? And maybe that's a Karen question, but.
That is a Karen question. I mean, the general outlook, and I don't want to put too many words in Karen's mouth, is that the 290 will cover all of the work that needs to be done relating to the park itself, and then the Chapter 90 money will do, if not everything, pretty much everything relating to the restructuring of the intersection, the additional sidewalk paving that needs to be done. But I don't, at least at this point, there is certainly not a significant additional expenditure of town funds. I'm not even sure if there's going to be any requested or required addition of town funds. That ideally, the answer to that is zero, but that's not going to be entirely known until the responses to the RFP come back and otherwise.
Okay.
Am I getting that right, Mark?
Yeah, you are. I think that the Chapter 90 money is going to be dedicated to the relocation of the road, and for those pieces, but the grant is going to cover, I believe, the drainage, the sidewalks, the walking paths, the planting beds, the remainder of the project. Everything that looks pretty is going to be covered by the grant.
Okay, all right. All right, the only other item I have is town meeting scheduling. And I put this on the agenda before sort of the flurry of activity the last few days, just because it became apparent that the warrant requirement was going to be a bit of an issue. Moving the town meeting date is relatively easy compared to the requirement that the warrant be posted at a particular time, and that time is at least 7 days before the town meeting. So I guess what I'm inclined to do is we don't have to decide it tonight. Everybody's seen the information we got from both Mr. Haggerty, which I thought was a very creative approach to dealing with the issue, but also from the Attorney General's office from Representative Dykma, and then followed on by the email from Town Council, Mr. Cipriano. This is my observation. Again, the issue is we've got a town bylaw that says the town meeting is in late March. In this instance, it'd be March 20th. The town bylaw and state requirements are that the town warrant be posted at least 7 days before that. And so even if we were going to, through the mechanism of the town moderator, kicking it over till April, May, June, and last year we did post the warrant because we didn't know all this was going to happen at the time it was scheduled. It posed problems because committees are going to keep working on various things with the idea that town meeting is going to be much later than March 20th. It appears that we have at least two options. I had a third, but it's not nearly as good as the two that Mr. Haggerty came up with, and then we got from Representative Dykman, and then again supplemented by Mr. Cipriano. It just seems to me that while Mr. Haggerty's is the more creative, we're on pretty solid ground with the Board of Selectmen, and I want to do this with notice rather than, again, when I put it on the agenda for today, it wasn't with the purpose of actually rescheduling the town meeting, but how to go about scheduling a town meeting with the town moderator involved. But it seems like, and I'm going to be stronger than that, it's pretty clear to me, based on all of that information, that we, the Board of Selectmen, can vote to have town meeting on a date different than March 20th, given that we're in a state of emergency, and that basically is the basis for us making the determination that we don't have to follow the town bylaw, that it's superseded by the state declared state of emergency and the state statute, and that we in fact can set a date for town meeting rather than setting a date and having to rely on Mr. Semino to weigh in. Now, all that being said, I'd want to let him weigh in on whether or not he thinks that's not either prudent or allowed. But my plan is to set it as an agenda item for our March 2nd meeting, and with the idea of setting a specific new date for town meeting, unless we are dissuaded from our ability to do that. So that's my 2 cents on the matter. Happy to hear from anyone else. And I'll start with Ms. Malinowski, if you have.
So I don't think that we've received all of the information that you just referenced.
Oh, really? I thought it had been. No, I apologize.
I haven't seen.
I know some of it came out late today.
Yeah.
I think the original link just included Marty and Lisa, and I'm just looking at that, and so I'm forwarding out that stuff to everyone else right now.
Okay, I thought, again, I need to look more carefully at the captions on these things. So the way I'll describe it in a little bit more detail then, Mr. Haggerty had come up with a proposal for calling a special town meeting and just putting in items that had to be set for the town meeting, which would allow us, again, to engineer the warrant issue. Again, very creative. Representative Dykeman, I'm not quite sure what prompted it, but she reached out to the Attorney General's office and asked for some clarification of what the declaration that was instituted last year, as well as the special legislation, how those interact in terms of giving towns flexibility. And we got a specific opinion. It's not an AG opinion. In other words, it doesn't have the quasi force of law. But when you look at the statute itself, it seems pretty bulletproof that if there's an emergency situation, whether it's public safety, however we characterize the emergency that the governor has declared, that allows the Board of Selectmen to supersede the existing bylaw. And so that we don't have to then rely on our setting a date and then the other provision of the special legislation, the town moderator, to kick it in 30-day increments. We, the Board of Selectmen, based on that determination by the governor that we're in a public health emergency, can set a different date, notwithstanding the bylaw. That's what those materials say in a little bit more legalese. But that is, and again, that's another good reason not to do it tonight, but to put it on for a specific agenda item for March 2nd, with the idea that we, the Board of Selectmen, I think pretty clearly have the ability to say, we understand the bylaw, we're in a public emergency, we are going to set a town meeting date of X, and we can talk about what X is. Okay.
Marty, real quick, the email from Representative Dykema was a result of conversations she and I had going back and forth about this issue. So she reached out to the AG's office, and that's the response that they gave her. I don't know if that was a cut and paste on her part, but it would have been great if it was an actual email with a seal and everything on the bottom of it. But I agree, the sentiment is there.
Yeah, but it prompted both Mr. Cipriano and myself to look at the Mass General Law. And the Mass General Law is, again, it didn't kick in last year because we had already set a town meeting date when the pandemic hit. But when you look at the statutory authority, I think it's pretty clear that we, the Board of Selectmen, can set a date. But I don't want to step on Mr. Semino's toes without giving him a chance to move his foot. So we can invite him for our March 2nd confab about this. Okay. That is it for me.
Marty?
Yep, Sam?
Quick comment. I took a 10-second look at what Mark just sent in terms of the thing from Aldo and town clerk. Seems to me that we had, I guess my issue is if there's any doubt about the power of the Board of Selectmen, a special town meeting approach is pretty clear that hard for me to believe, and I need to look at it more closely, but that is consistent with past history in terms of the ability to do that kind of thing. So it seems to me that might be a little safer, but let's look at it more closely.
Sam, I don't disagree with you, except let me read you the statutory language. provided, however, that notwithstanding the provisions of this section or any other law, bylaw, or charter to the contrary, a town, by the vote of its Board of Selectmen or Town Council, may delay the annual town meeting up till June 30th. That's pretty clear language.
Yeah.
And as I think both Mr. Cipriano and I, it's so much cleaner than going through the special town meeting route.
Yeah. Well,
but again, we'll have a chance to look at that for the March 2nd meeting.
I'll look at that. Thank you.
All right, members' reports. Ms. Braccio.
All right, thank you. On February 9th, there was I'll make this real quick. I know we're on a time issue. So at the MMA, MSA board meetings, just a couple things to share, that the January tax revenues for the state were $530 million, which was above the benchmark that they were looking for. So that's some good news. The state had also earmarked $1.7 billion from the stabilization fund, but it looks like only $1.1 billion will be needed to get us through June 30th. The governor views the 2022 budget as a recovery budget. Some of the highlights were to grow unrestricted government aid by 3.5%, restart the Student Opportunity Act and grow Chapter 70 by 3.7%. They're looking for a minimum aid of $30 per student increase, and the Ways and Means Committee will have a budget to the governor by 7/1 of 21. Also, the climate bill that the governor vetoed will be refiled because the legislative session had ended and it was not an appropriation bill. The governor could not use a line item veto. So it was accept or fail situation. It has been refiled and it was returned to the governor just over a week ago. They're hoping for a consensus, but the votes are there to override the veto if needed. Those were just some of the highlights. I can certainly share the rest later. I'm going to try to put a newsletter together on some of the things. And Marty, if I can just veer for 1 second off this, there's something that came up today that I would just like to share with the board as well. I'd like to offer condolences to the family of Jim McCaw. Jim was the director of buildings and grounds for FAE, and he was also the electrical inspector for the town of Southborough for 34 years. He was also a volunteer member of the police and fire department. He was a Navy veteran of the Korean War. And to his family and to him, that we thank you, sir, for your service to the town of Southborough and our country. That's it. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Lisa, and well said. If he's a good guy, he's a very good guy. Master Plan Committee update. I'm assuming that's you, Mr. Stivers?
That's me. As folks know, Lisa and I are on the Master Plan Committee, and we've been making good progress toward an update of the 2008 plan. We've completed a review of all the plan components. We've got a similar structure that we had in 2008, but we're taking a little bit different approach. There was a lot of descriptive material in the old plan that we're actually going to use as a reference point, and we're focusing more on the goals and strategies and implementation steps this time. We've divided the work among the committee members, and individual members are working on initial drafts of the various chapters. We've actually had 2 reviews of drafts of chapters so far, and we hope to have all the drafts done, initial drafts, in the next couple of months. So we're on good track, we think, to get this thing done. Hopefully, we'd like to get it done before town meeting, whenever that happens here. And we want to get on the agenda for Board of Selectmen at some point in the next month or so to give an update more specifically, not only for the board, but for the citizens as well. And we look forward to getting this wrapped up and therefore qualifying for some state grants. That's it. Thank you.
I've been watching some of those meetings on and off, and it's a ton of work that's being done there. So I look forward to that when there's a formal presentation to the board.
Good.
Update on office hours. Who is that?
That's me.
All right, Chelsea.
Lisa and I hosted office hours last week. We had a few residents join, lots of good questions. There was one question about if the Board of Selectmen would be publishing our audit management report on our website. I think it's a good idea for us to add to our website. And then I think everything else between Lisa and I, we kind of divided up and followed up with the individual residents. So it was definitely time well spent.
Mm-hmm. I'd suggest we publish all the audit reports back for the last several years so people can see the track there if they're interested. Not hugely exciting reading, but useful reference material, I think.
I don't even know why, but I was looking at something, and the gentleman who presented the audit this time around was the auditor in like 2004 as well. I'm curious as to just how far back he goes. And next office hours are who?
I'm interested in doing it, but I've got a conflict for next Tuesday evening, so I can't do that. But I remain very interested in participating whenever there's an opening.
I can do it. I can do it alone, or I guess anybody. Brian, you're on.
Sure.
All right,
I'm on.
we're a reprise of our last roll. It got rave reviews, so I'm sure it'll be just as good this time.
Maybe the scouts will look for the interview that night so I can knock off two things at once.
Multitasking, good.
All right, town administrator report, Mr. Purple.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be quick about this, but I've got 3 quick updates. There's been a lot of activity going on with regards to COVID vaccinations for our Southborough residents, specifically those 75 and older. I do want to give a shout out to Pam at the senior center. She and her staff have been doing a remarkable job making phone calls, using the database that she has of the seniors in town to try to make sure that we reach out to as many people as possible. Southborough was asked to participate in a consortium type or collaborative type of vaccination clinic in Hopkinton. We had several hundred doses that we could fill in that clinic. The clinic took place last Thursday and Friday and yesterday, and it was supposed to be today, but it was put off with the weather until tomorrow. I believe that approximately 140, 150 of our seniors were able to get their first vaccination at the clinic. It was interesting because Pam had said a large number of seniors that they spoke to already had appointments elsewhere, be them at some of the mass vaccination sites or doctor's offices. So they declined. But I've heard nothing detrimental about the clinic, so everything seems to have gone off well. And again, thank you to Emily Amico, who public health nurse, who also was reaching out to Hopkinton to try to get us involved with that. Hopkinton did not receive another allocation of vaccine at this point, so we'll see how that regional effort continues moving forward. As you know, the state really has seemed to be focusing on the mass vaccination sites rather than the local cities and towns. So a lot of communities are being turned down what they're applying for until more vaccine becomes available. I think that's probably going to be the case. Also want to point out that our veterans agent made us aware that COVID-19 vaccines are being made available at the Bedford VA Medical Center to veterans 50 years and older. You can contact the Bedford VA to make an appointment. The veteran must be registered with the VA Healthcare in order to receive the vaccine. And again, thanks to Brian Stearns for that information. All of this is up on the town's website under Newsflash on the front page. All of this has been tweeted out. We're trying to get this out as much as possible. The last piece was something that just came in over the last day or so. Charles River Medical Associates have 200 Moderna vaccines available for seniors that are 75 years of age and over. And the office location is in Hudson. The best part of the registration process is you don't need to do it by computer. You simply need to call the office and they will enter all the information for you. Again, that information is on the website. The next clinic is tomorrow from 1 to 5. And then they also have one Saturday, February 20th from 9 to 3. And thanks to Leslie Chamberlain for helping to facilitate that. Also, we are looking at a targeted vaccination clinic for Colonial Gardens at some point, in the next month or so. So it looks like, according to my conversation with Pam this afternoon, it looks like our senior population, 75 and older, is pretty well taken care of. And now, she's starting to look down the row of dominoes to the 65 and older, which is going to be, probably, a more daunting task when we get there.
All right, great. It is 6:59. I'm going to see if I can draw an inside straight here. I move to approve consent agenda items A through F. Mr. Stivers second, but we're going to have to hold.
No,
Sorry.
That's a hold, yeah.
Unfortunately, Marty, I need to recuse from item D.
All right, well, then we're going to put the consent agenda item past the 7 p.m. Verizon poll hearing that's specifically scheduled on the agenda.
Nice try.
Sam objected first. Let's blame Sam, not me.
I got three
There
of
were,
them.
there were a lot of hands up.
I was going to ask for
There
your
were people in
opinion
the
on
windows
B.
behind you that had their hands up, so.
Yeah.
All right. Pursuant to the legal notice of public hearing, Town of Southborough, the Southborough Board of Selectmen shall hold a public hearing on Tuesday, February 16 at 7 p.m. in a virtual Zoom meeting to consider a request for permission by Mass Electric Company, National Grid, and Verizon New England, Inc. to install a stub pole and guy for P33-84 at 78 Pine Hill Road. The public may participate in the virtual meeting via a Zoom link located at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. And that legal notice was posted February 2nd, 2021 for a request that was received on January 8, 2021. And my understanding, Mr. Purple, is that we have a representative from Mass Electric and/or Verizon ready to join us. Am I right about that?
We do. I believe that's the person who just popped in with the phone number, which has just been brought into the room.
All right. I see a 401 area code, so somebody's based in Rhode Island. And they're muted.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah,
Hi,
hi,
sir.
it's Al Galvin, engineer for National Grid Electric. How you doing?
Well, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Sure.
So I'm hoping you heard, we read the legal notice for the request. Do you want to give a thumbnail sketch of exactly what it is that is being asked for? And then we'll see if there are any questions. The materials are pretty straightforward. We'll see if there are any questions from the Board of Selectmen.
Sure. Yeah, we're installing a 35-foot stub pole, support pole across from 33-5 with an anchor off of it to, keep it from leaning in the future, keep that stability in the pole line there, and the cable lines on the street. So that's just something so there's not future, due to the tension on the lines coming down the street and equipment along the way. We want to keep that line supported and upright, so there's no future outages or anything like that. So that's the idea behind the stub pole there.
All right, curiosity more than anything else from is that in a situation like this, was that because of requests from residents? Is it because of a sort of normal review that's done by the companies of their infrastructure? How does it come about for the request to be made?
Yeah, judging by what the information I have here, it looks like it's the overhead crew supervisors. They'll survey their local areas, and if they're installing additional equipment or anything along certain streets and areas, they'll request things like this just to make sure that the pole lines or there's proper support, because as you add equipment over time, the tensions and the weight, things like that, can pull the poles or pull the lines. You want to try to restrict that, so we get ahead of that by installing these support lines and support poles, either push braces towards the properties or stub poles across the street, like in this case, just to keep everything upright and stable going forward. So there's no future outages if we can help it.
Okay. I'm going to go to our engineer, Mr. Shea, to start us off.
Thank you. So the only question, is this strictly for a support pole, or will also be a service 278 resulting from this?
No, at this time, it's strictly a support pole. I mean, it's certainly if a home is built off, the same side of the stub pole, we could possibly come off of it. It would be there if need be, possibly to run a line off of or a service drop. But right now, it's just a support pole to keep everything stable.
Very good. No further questions from me, Marty.
Well, sorry about that, Mr. Stivers. I was muted.
Just to be sure I understand, this is a new pole, not a replacement pole for one that already exists there. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, it's a new pole and an anchor off it.
And it's on the opposite side of the street of the pole that's going to be supporting, is that correct?
Yes, yeah, it's going over the street with a pole-to-pole guy wire,
Okay.
and then there'll be a 35-foot pole and anchor coming off of it. There's a fuse on the on the current pole. There's a fuse there, and then it branches down like a like a driveway, servicing other homes. But yeah, it's all new.
And will the new pole location be any issue relative to residents on that the property that it's adjacent to there? And the guy where, is that something that sort of goes into the yard of that particular resident and it could be an issue for them?
No, not at this time. It's all a wooded area. The pole and the anchor are within town take, so it's not in a private lot. So right now, it's not impeding on anything. I mean, if someone were to build in the future, obviously, maybe they could run underground to that pole or utilize it some way if it fits their need. But it's all on town take right now, so it's not impeding on anything.
And not going to affect our ability to mow the underbrush along the road there necessarily? I don't know. I'm not familiar with that particular specific area, but maybe that's not a place where we need to mow frequently. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a very rural wooded area street. It's all just trees, empty lot. There's nothing there at this time, so
Okay.
it doesn't seem to be any issue. I mean, down the line, if someone were to build off of that area, they could certainly possibly utilize it if necessary.
Okay. All right. Thanks. That's it for me. Thank you, Marty.
Ms. Braccio.
I'm actually all set. Thank you.
All right, and Ms. Malinowski.
I am all set as well.
All right. I don't think there's need for any further discussion. There's no other presentation that's required, Mark, from the police or weigh-in from DPW or anything like that. Am I right about that?
There is not. I will tell you that there was a note from Miss Galligan that she had sent to me or sent to Miss Esposito that she was pleased with the proposal. The pole's been leaning and causing a problem for deliveries on a private road. So she was in favor of the improvement. You do have one hand raised from Mr. Litt.
All right, Vanessa, can we bring Mr. Litt over? Mr. Litt?
Good evening. This is sort of my usual thing when these requests come up, and that is a request that you make your approval contingent on the placement of this stuff not obstructing any current or potential future sidewalk that might be placed.
Yes, that's all taken into account. At this time, there's no sidewalk on that side that I understand, or any plans for one.
Well, my concern is that, we have an effort within the town to add sidewalks where we can. And I'm just concerned that we not end up with a pole that has to be moved whenever we get around to doing something, here or in any of the other places that these requests for poles go in. So if things can be placed, far enough away from where a sidewalk might go, that would save us some future trouble.
All right, Mr. Litt, thanks very much. Any discussion about Mr. Litt's comment?
Sounds like a good idea to me.
Okay, so Mr.
Yeah. I mean, so I took a ride out there over the weekend, and I think in general, and again, without having detailed plans and the exact layout for the right of way, we could very well be in a situation where we need to do a widening to even put sidewalks in that stretch. I think that the pole is proposed within the town right of way as it exists now. Certainly supportive of adding sidewalks. I can't remember where Pine Hill Road lies on that priority survey that we had done maybe 4 or 5 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. But
I think that's going to be on the updated version, Brian.
Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. No further comments.
All right, so is there a motion?
Well, I'll, I guess, first and foremost, move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Discussion, none. Ms. Braccio,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Shea,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Healy is aye. So that the public hearing is closed. And the specific request is to install a stub pole and guy for P33-84 at 78 Pine Hill Road. And so I guess based on the discussion we've had so far, the question is whether or not the motion is to approve that request straight out or to approve it with some sort of proviso. I guess I'm kind of with Mr. Shea on this. There are too many unknowns about where a sidewalk might go, what to include a requirement now. I think it's a good point by Mr. Litt, but that's my view.
Could we make it with a request that they position the pole as far as reasonably possible from the street to at least give some flexibility for sidewalk later?
Yeah, I believe might be a stone wall on that area as well, and I don't want to get into a situation where we're disturbing the stone
Right.
wall also. So not at this stage. So
Right.
So is there a motion? All right, I'll move to approve the installation of a stub pole and guy for P33-84 at 78 Pine Hill Road as requested by Mass Electric and Verizon New England.
second.
Discussion. Ms. Braccio,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Shea,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
and Mr. Healy is aye. Sir, I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, but you did a good job. You've got your approval.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right, have a good evening.
You too. Bye.
All right, we are back to consent agenda with 75 holes. So let's just go through them one at a time instead of trying to parse it. Item A, the approval of open session minutes, February 2nd, 2021. Any issues?
Yeah,
Okay.
very small point. In lines 65 and 67, they refer to GHB as the consultants, and it's V as in Victor, VHB.
It is VHB. You're right.
Was corrected.
Okay. And then Ms. Malinowski, I think I saw your hand up as well.
Yep. So row 84, the motion that you made, Marty, should read, made the motion that we will only consider the candidates that were before us tonight for the open position on capital planning.
Yeah, no, that's a better statement of it. Okay. Anything
And then-
beside, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I'm up. I have another one. Row
Okay.
225. I'd like it to read, she hopes the personnel board reviews the sick and vacation accrual policies in the SAP sooner rather than later.
All right. Mr. Purple, did someone get those two ivitems to?
I emailed them to Kate already, just so that she wouldn't have to keep up with.
Okay, with the edits noted by Mr. Stivers and Ms. Malinowski, I will move to approve open session minutes, February 2, 2021.
Second.
Second.
Discussion, none. Ms. Braccio. Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Mr. Shea.
Aye.
Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
And Mr. Healy is aye. They are approved. Are there any issues about the donations? No. All right. I'll move to approve items B and C, the acceptance of the specified donations.
Second.
Discussion, none. Ms. Braccio.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Mr. Shea.
Aye.
Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
Mr. Healy, aye. Both are approved. D, the wastewater study grant.
So, Mr. Healy, could the minutes for tonight's meeting just reflect that I am recusing from this item?
All right, they will. And are there some questions or comments about it? Yeah, Ms. Braccio.
Thank you. So as I look through this, I had a couple questions. One is more of a process question. I know the request that we got didn't come directly from the EDC, who was in charge of the wastewater study. So I reached out to the chair just to make sure that they had taken a position and voted on this request. And he could not recollect if on their January 15th meeting they did. He didn't get back to me. So I'm not comfortable with moving this forward unless I know for sure that EDC has signed off on the and agrees with the request to award the contract.
We have Ms. Reynolds in the audience. Maybe Claire, you can clear up if you know one way or the other whether or not this was presented to EDC by you or someone else.
They're still muted.
Got a slash across your microphone, Claire. There we go.
I'm here.
All right. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Hi, everybody.
Do you know the answer to Lisa's questions?
My apologies. I had stepped out until I didn't realize that the previous conversation would be that fast. Lisa, can you repeat your question?
Sure, Claire. Just a question as I was going through it. I know the request came from you as the consultant to award the contract. And I just wanted to make sure that EDC had discussed this and a vote was taken, because typically it's the board of the committee that's in charge or monitoring the request that makes it. So I had reached out to John because I saw that there was some discussion listed on the 115 agenda, and he couldn't remember if a vote was taken. So I'm always concerned to move forward on a process if we're not sure. And again, I'm sure that they're in agreement, Claire, but we just don't have it on record that, their position was taken. So my question to you, I guess, is, was this discussed with EDC? Did they look over the proposals and take a position on awarding?
It was discussed with the EDC. I had told them that I had spoken with an independent engineer to get some guidance from him. The contract was awarded to the town, so there was really no need for the EDC to take a vote.
Okay.
Is DPW opined on this then?
I contacted Karen and left a message. They have no, Sam, I contacted Karen. She has no town engineer who can weigh in on this.
I'd be interested in Karen's opinion, I guess, as DPW.
She didn't give one.
Claire, is there a timetable that is impacting this?
Well, it could be held over to the next meeting if you folks have some specific questions that you'd like me to look at. Just let me know what those are.
Claire, I think we will do that then.
Yeah.
There's enough I have a feeling it's uncertainty that can be easily cleared up, but I think folks would be more comfortable clearing it up.
Well, here's the thing, folks. As in my position, I had nobody on EDC with engineering credentials in this particular area. I reached out to Karen. There was no town engineer. So what happened was I ended up getting an independent review. I have, as I wrote in the letter, I have no engineering credentials. The person who was on the Board of Selectmen who could possibly weigh into this can't do it. Guys, I tried to do everything that I could.
Oh, no, Claire, no one is suggesting you did anything other than the right things. It just is, and we got the Boy Scouts watching tonight. And so Ms. Braccio very correctly has pointed out that even when sometimes it can seem a little bit silly, that we make sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's so that so there's a record of the appropriate town committees having taken a position or choosing not to take a position. This is not meant as even a hint of a criticism.
No,
for anything
I
you've done.
understand.
No. You should be applauded for what you've done.
Well,
but we just want to make sure that we follow the correct route.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it that you would like me to do?
Well, I guess Ms. Braccio has said one very simple thing, and that is we think it's important that the EDC take a position, even if we can forecast exactly what that position is going to be, given their previous positions in this area, but to have there be a formal position being taken by the EDC by a vote. That's number one. I think Mr. Stivers would just like, I guess, and Mr. Purple can reach out to Ms. Galligan and make sure that even if her response is there's no one in the town who is going to be able to weigh in on this, but a response from our DPW director about the requested services. Is there anything beyond those two? They seem pretty straightforward.
Marty?
Yep.
Can I suggest one more? Given that this is wastewater, our former public health agent, Mr. Pazinski, has a lot of experience with this kind of thing. He might have an opinion in terms of.
I've already checked there, Sam.
And so has he provided recommendation?
No.
Yeah, I'm not, Sam, that is, I mean, I think if we have our current DPW and if we have the EDC, I don't want to give Ms. Reynolds too many assignments.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
I'm looking for some more technical engineering input on
Well,
it.
I think, Sam, too, we actually added Mr. Belniak on EDC, who's an engineer. So I
Good.
think maybe
Okay.
where there
He's an
wasn't
asset engineer. He's not it's like,
Yeah.
we have somebody on EDC who works for an engineering firm, as you all know, but he is an architect. So the way it works with engineering firms is they all have their individual specialties. My question is, which still needs to be clarified, is if this is a contract that was awarded to the town, why is it, I just don't understand, is why is it that EDC has to weigh in on it?
Oh, I guess I'll give a first shot at this, and I know Lisa's chomping at the bit as well. It is. I don't think they're required to. I think we could, but they've been so critical in pushing this project that I think it would be. I don't think this is going to happen. But if 2 weeks from now we found out that EDC was vehemently opposed to going in this direction, that's all. It's just to have our I's dotted and T's crossed to make sure that all of our oars are pulling in the same direction. That's all.
And just to add to that, Marty, too, I mean, EDC had applied for the grant. So I think they have some level of feedback that, again, it's crossing I's and dotting T. I did that backwards. Dotting I's and crossing T's.
If you go back and you look at the minutes from the January meeting.
They're not available, Claire. I tried. That was my first step before I reached out to John.
But Claire, that's why I asked you if time was an element. If it's not,
it isn't.
Yeah.
But
so I would reach out to Mr. Wood and for the next EDC meeting, which will certainly be before our March 2nd meeting, just you'll be able to communicate to us what their formal view is on this is. I believe me, I think I'm pretty able to forecast what that's going to be, but then we'll have a record of it.
Yep.
And number two, just a record of a response from Ms. Galligan, even if I don't feel comfortable weighing in on this. We'll know that that's the position our DPW director took on it, and we'll have a higher level of comfort.
well, I can give a response to that right now because I put in a call the other day and I haven't received a response. So
No, but that's why Mr. Purple is going to make sure that you get one.
okay.
Yeah, I'll follow up with Ms. Gallagher.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Claire.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that is going to be put over to March 2nd. Is there any discussion about the request to extend the capital planning school research subcommittee? No, so I'll move to approve that request to June 30th, 2021.
Second.
Second by Ms. Malinowski. Discussion none. Ms. Braccio.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Mr. Shea.
Aye.
Mr. Stivers. I heard you say aye even though you're muted.
Aye.
Mr. Healy is aye. That's unanimous. And finally is F, approval of the executive session minutes for February 2nd, 2021. Obviously, if there are issues with are there any issues with them?
Yeah, there's a simple issue with that the change I requested last time didn't get in. To add one word, liability.
Okay.
So
With that word that Mr. Stivers wants added, I will move to approve the executive session minutes.
second.
By Mr. Stivers, discussion none. Ms. Braccio.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Mr. Shea,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
and Mr. Healy is aye. We are done with the consent agenda. I don't think there's enough time in 4 minutes to get through any of the ABC, other matters properly before the board. No, I was going to say I'll give a shot at CSX, but I think it's more than just a 5-minute. I could probably present it in 4 or 5 minutes, but I think there may well be discussion. So I apologize to the capital committee. It looks like we're going to have to put you over until after the public forum, but you were going to sit in on that anyway. So, and with that,
Marty, Vanessa says there's a raised hand.
okay.
Gloria
Ms.
Radler.
Radler. Okay, can we bring Ms. Radler over? Ms. Radler, while you are getting ready to unmute yourself, I'm going to ask you if this is, if you have a comment that has to do with the items that are either just recently on the agenda or about to be on the agenda. Ms. Radler? Ms. Radler, we are not able to hear you. I don't know if you're speaking. You're shown as unmuted, but we can't hear you. That remains the case. We still can't hear you. Ms. Radler, we are now about to move on to our public forum. So you've got about 30 seconds if you're able to, whatever it's microphone or computer. Believe me, I feel your pain. I find myself in these sort of situations all the time, but again, no volume is coming through. All right, Vanessa, why don't we're going to open up the public forum. I'm sorry, Ms. Radler.
Marty, can we move Julie Conley over?
Yes. And anyone else, Lisa, that is going to participate?
I think this is a good start. If Julie decides as we go forward that there's anyone else that she'd like to move over, that's great. And also Vanessa is going to do a shared screen on this.
Okay. All right. I am going to stop talking in about 30 seconds. Just the Board of Selectmen, who during the fall with several joint meetings with the EDC and with the Planning Board and others, have gotten to this point with some proposed zoning changes with a warrant article including those zoning changes, focusing on what we'll be calling the downtown district. And for those out there, it looks like we've got a pretty good turnout to start. I am going to, as I said, stop talking. It is 7:29, and I'm going to turn things over to Ms. Braccio and Ms. Connolly, who have been very much at the forefront of framing this issue and pushing this issue to where we find ourselves right now. So, Ms. Braccio, the floor is yours.
Wonderful, thank you. Vanessa, could you mind putting up the presentation, please?
Can you see it okay now?
I can see it, thank you.
Okay.
So I guess, first of all, I want to thank everybody for the participants for coming to participate in the public. I guess that kind of doesn't make sense, but thank everybody for coming who wants to participate in the public forum on the downtown district. A lot of work has gone on over the last 2 to 3 years with creating a vision of a vibrant downtown that we can all enjoy with green space, walkability, and options for mixed use. A place we can gather when COVID is over, have a cup of coffee, grab a bite, or frequent the local businesses that make our town a success and also an attractive place to live. The Board of Selectmen would like to thank the EDC for spearheading this long effort. For the last 5 months, there's been a focus on collaboration with your town boards in working towards a consensus document that addressed the concerns and included input from our joint meetings in October and November, which were attended by members of the Economic Development Committee, Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, SHOPC, Southborough Housing Opportunities Partnership Committee, the Historical Commission, as well as the public. We're happy to share with you tonight for your review some of the highlights of the proposed zoning district and answer any questions that you may have. The Planning Board will start the first of many public hearings on February 22nd. I hope you can join them and share additional feedback or concerns. Only working together can we get the downtown all that we envision for our future generations to enjoy. Vanessa, can you go to the second slide? Thank you. So I think the first two slides, this one and particularly the next one, are important because it shows how far we've come and the changes that have taken place, whether you agree or you don't disagree. So we want to make sure that this document that's coming forward to you now addresses how we sculpt the future. Can you go to the third slide, Vanessa, please? And again, this just shows you, back in the past what it was and, where we brought it to many years ago. And, we're at that stage again. We're looking to craft the future. So I'll now turn the start of the presentation over to Julie Connolly from EDC, who's been involved in leading the charge for change. Also a thank you to Marika from the EDC coordinator for all her help on creating the presentation that you'll see tonight. Julie?
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you to the Board of Selectmen for having us here and for hosting us tonight. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate the work that has gone on, particularly in the last 5 or 6 months with the Planning Board, with the Board of Selectmen, with input from SHOPC, from the Historic Society. It's been a real joint effort, but I wanted to just backtrack a little bit and let everyone know sort of how we got here and why we are here. And then we'll delve into the specifics of what the proposed zoning bylaw looks like, what changes that we're looking to make, and how that affects how that would play out and potentially change the landscape of the downtown. Vanessa, can you go to the next slide, please? So just to let everybody know what we're talking about, under the current zoning bylaw, this is the Downtown Business Village District. And just for point of reference, if you're looking, the road that's sort of going straight through the middle horizontally is Main Street, where you say that top left portion where it says 11, that's that building that formerly contained the Santander that has currently the We Care, a dentist, that little area with parking in front of it. And then obviously to the right of that number 11, kind of going down on the left side of School Street. And then you'll see it continuing towards the right. Park Street is that kind of diagonal street that is that line between the green and the pink, flanking the left of that pink. And if you keep going, what looks like a street, kind of that wide space going down the middle, is actually the railroad track and the easement area around it, which cannot be built up. And then sort of flanking the right on the top is Newton Street, and then flanking the right on the bottom is Boston Road. So that's sort of just the general area that we're talking about. Next slide, please. So I've been, it's by way of introduction for those who don't know me, I've been a resident of Southborough for just about 10 years, coming on 10 years. I have 3 kids in the school system, and I've been a member of the Economic Development Committee since its inception, which I think was about 7 years ago. But for the past 3+ years, we've been focused on one of our big projects has been on the downtown. And where this came from our perspective, started off kind of anecdotally when I was, would talk to neighbors or friends about doing work with the EDC. Everyone would say, well, what's going to happen with downtown? And we heard this enough that we decided to say, okay, well, what are people looking for? What do people want downtown? Are they happy or not? And so we put out a survey in the fall of 2017, and without diving into too much detail, there were questions, and then we had a lot of comments as well. And some of the main takeaways were that there seemed to be a lot of support for things like restaurants, coffee shops, pubs, retail. There was over 90% of the respondents said that they were looking for things like that. 67% of respondents said that they were looking for more retail, small scale retail specifically. And there was some pretty strong support for mixed use development as well. Only 15% opposed mixed use, with the remaining 85% either saying they strongly supported it, or were, didn't either needed more information or didn't care strongly either way. There was also a lot of support for preserving historic buildings, for having more public and gathering space, as well as connectivity to other parts of town. So after that survey, we felt like, okay, there seems to be some momentum here. People are looking for something. So we had several public forums where we honed this in. And actually, Vanessa, can you go to the next slide? And so so that was sort of our base. Now, the other interesting things was that that our findings were not actually news. When we looked at when we started to look back, we realized that the things that we were starting to form in our mind, this image that we had, lined up very strongly with the master plan that the town had commissioned in 2008, which encouraged mixed use development. It encouraged some improvements to downtown, including infrastructure. There were other reports as well, notably the 2015 housing production plan encouraged mixed use, and mixed use being residential over commercial space is what we're talking about when we're using that term right now, even though that's different than what our current bylaw defines it as. So I'll talk about that in a minute. But the housing production plan supported this, and then very recently, we put together a new master plan committee last year, and they put out a survey, and those results seem to align as well. Vanessa, you can go to the next slide. So a little bit about what happened next, and why we're looking to make some changes downtown. After the survey results, we decided we need to figure out what was preventing any improvement downtown. So we contracted with an organization called the Urban Land Institute. They're a quasi-governmental organization that works with municipalities to put together, they call it a TAP program. It's a technical assistance program where they analyze a defined geographic area within a community, and they work with the stakeholders, with the residents and businesses in that area, and they bring in engineers, developers, people who know real estate, and they analyze what could potentially happen in that area. And they determine what is preventing those things from happening and those goals from being reached. So the two main takeaways from that, and there was a lot of information in there, the two main takeaways that we discovered was that the two main impediments to development downtown were, one, the wastewater management or lack thereof, and two, the zoning bylaw. The current zoning bylaw was passed in 1955, so it's over 65 years old, and it was appropriate for that time, but is the language of it is not a modern day bylaw. There are several things in it that seem to stymie any change or improvement downtown. So what we're looking for, and just a little bit about the purpose of why we're doing this, is based on the study, based on the multiple studies that the town has commissioned, and the surveys that have been done, there seems to be a lot of support for some revitalization of the town center to make it more of the heart of our community. It seems that our residents are looking for retail, office, residential, recreational opportunities. And also, our goals as a town include more diversity in housing. If you look at our housing stock, you'll see there's not a lot of diversity there. Diversity in housing gives opportunities for our aging population to stay in town comfortably and to downsize. It allows opportunities for new people to come into town. And as you may have noticed, that a lot of new development that's happening in different areas of the state or the country seem to be more mixed-use development where there's residential combined with retail, and that's because there's more of a push for people to want to have walkability or bikeability, and to be able to easily access certain amenities like restaurants and shops. Again, we know who we are. We're Southborough, and the space there is very limited, but we think that mixed use has to be a strong component of moving forward. And also we wanted to, make sure that we have a thriving business community downtown. And we know we've got some excellent businesses down there. Unfortunately, we've lost a few during the pandemic, but business creates business, and having a couple of strong businesses downtown, what we've seen in other communities, does not negatively impact existing businesses, but it actually promotes those businesses. So we think that this has a net benefit for everyone, including the local businesses there. Vanessa, can you switch the slide, please? So I wanted to start to talk about some of the changes that are being made, and Lisa, feel free to jump in, and I'm going to try not to take up much time here, because what we're hoping is that this is actually going to be a collaborative discussion. We're sure people have questions, but we wanted to highlight some of the changes that this proposed bylaw includes, and to be able to have a open discussion about them where people can ask questions. So the first change is the change to by right uses. So currently, anyone coming forward to the town with a project has to get a special permit for the use, and that's put out by the planning board. Having a list of enumerated by right uses allows a sense of certainty for somebody coming forward with a project. They know, for example, if they want to put in an ice cream shop, that's one of the by right uses, as long as it's less than 3,000 square feet. It's one less hurdle for them to cross. It takes out an element of uncertainty. And also, it's sort of a sign from the town that this is what we're looking for. And these uses, obviously none of this is set in stone yet, but this thoughtful list was put in place because of the multiple surveys and studies that have been done. So these are things from, our research has shown that there are amenities and businesses that our town is looking to have in the downtown space. So it's sort of an indicator to investors or developers that we're open for business for these particular purposes, and it encourages these purposes and makes it easier for somebody to come in for one of these uses. So that's sort of the main benefit of having these by right uses enumerated specifically in the bylaw. And also, I think one of the major changes of having a by right use is right now it's at the discretion of the planning board. And while at this day and age, and in 2021, we have a planning board, and maybe we trust their judgment and we think they're going to make the right choices. But we don't know who's going to be on the planning board in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years. And, having a vision for our town that is voted on at town meeting by the 2/3 majority preserves this vision for downtown and takes away the discretion that might happen by individual planning board members down the road. So I think this really lays the foundation.
And if I can just add to Julie, so I think the most important takeaway from me on the by right uses is not so much even discretion. It's very clear to anybody coming in that's looking for our downtown district, what they can do and what they can't do. It's a more streamlined, streamlined process in some ways, that there's no question. They know that they can do a child care center. If they want to come in and have a dog kennel, it's not on the list. They currently can't do that. So I think by right uses make sense in a lot of cases, but there still is oversight, over certain square feet by the planning board, which I think is important. And, I think obviously being a permitting board, there's a lot of value in what they can bring based on their experience. So again, the by right uses is important.
I agree. And just to call out sort of without reading from the page, some of the by right uses that are here or a professional office or bank, sort of a artisan or craft or shop or bakery, a bed and breakfast, an art gallery, a childcare center, a co-working center, and then under 3,000 square feet, there are additional uses that are by right, including retail, ice cream shop, specialty food service, no drive-throughs would be permitted. That's already in the bylaw, and we preserve that. Restaurants, so they're just different, and also personal services is the last one. So things like a barber shop or a hair salon or a tailor, those types of uses, would, as long as they're under the square footage restriction, would be a by right use.
Yeah. And we can come back to the slide if there's questions on it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll go through it and we can definitely take questions. The next change is what we're calling the design guidelines. So in the current version of the zoning bylaw, there are some design guidelines in there. So basically rules about how different designs, as far as that means what building materials are used or what signage sizes are allowed, things like that. Some of that is baked into the current zoning bylaw. But we, after speaking with different towns, looking at their work, after speaking with, collaborating with the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board, we're in agreement that that the design guidelines as a separate document is a better approach going forward for a couple of reasons. One, again, the zoning bylaw probably needs a little bit of updating in this department to make it fit, a 21st century town. But also, again, it provides a degree of certainty for a proponent of a project coming in to know exactly what they're looking for. And design guidelines include things not only like building materials and facades, but also things like vegetation, amount of green space that's required, and things like that. Keeping this out of the bylaw itself, which is very difficult to amend, as evidenced by the fact that it is not been amended all that much. It requires 2/3 vote of town meeting. By keeping this out of the bylaw, it makes it a little bit more easy to change. And so these would be promulgated by the planning board and enforced by the planning board. So the planning board would create them, and projects would be reviewed vis-a-vis these design guidelines. Now, if in 10 years, styles change, if there's new building materials, I keep thinking back about, environmental factors that are going to be coming to play as we tackle things like climate change. We might want to change some of these design guidelines, and the planning board could put in a process where they could change these design guidelines through an open hearing process, so that, there's still input from the town, but it would be a little bit easier to change as needed over the years, whereas the bylaw itself is something that would be, is sort of the foundation of the town for the next several decades, probably. Floor area ratio. I know Lisa's going to want to talk about this one. Lisa, do you want to just do this slide, or you want me to explain the baseline?
No, you could. Why don't you do the baseline, and then I'll explain why I think this is very important. What's on the screen.
So this was an interesting topic. So basically what floor area ratio is the number of square feet a building can contain vis-a-vis the size of the lot. So for example, if you look at that middle line, the 1.0 floor area ratio, if you have a 1-story building with a 1.0 floor area ratio, then your building can literally go to the edge of the lot. However, if you have a 1.0 floor area ratio on a 2-story building, then your building size can only be half of the lot. So if you look at that first, that in the middle row on the left, that's what a floor area ratio of 1.0 on a 2-story building looks like. And again, if you have a 4-story building with a 1.0, it starts to look like that middle square
graph. And I think it gives us some room to think about how, if we wanted to go a little bit bigger, I know there was some suggestions on going bigger, how we could do it, and the language that we may have to insert or actually change within the document so you don't get the whole sprawl of, taking over a lot. So I think there's certainly some discussion here through this forum and certainly through the planning board public hearings. I know the planning board will be very interested to hear, what the public thinks on this. But again, it's just an important graph to kind of explain why this discussion is so important. So I think we'll leave it at that.
Vanessa, thank you. And the last slide, we've touched on this, is the importance of mixed use development. In the current iteration of the zoning bylaw, you cannot have a residential unit over a commercial or office or other unit. I often give the example that under the current bylaw, you can have your night watchman over your printing press, but not this. So it's just antiquated language. In today's times, people think of mixed use as residential over commercial or over office. And I think that's important for a few reasons. One, because as I talked about earlier, it provides diversity in the housing stock, which is one of the town's goals, and I think is important to our community. And two, it makes a project profitable. It's very difficult for a developer to come in, put a one-story commercial. This makes it something that's more attractive to somebody who's looking to do that. Makes it something that's viable, whereas otherwise it might not be. And again, I think that from what we're hearing, this is in line with the with what the town is interested in and looking for, what its residents are looking for. So I think this is really the crux of the changes to the proposed bylaw is this mixed use piece of it. So that's all. I wanted to keep my piece of it short, because the point of this is to hear from the residents and to see what you're thinking, to answer any questions that you have leading up to next week's public hearing.
Great. Thank you, Julie. So as Julie said, this was basically some of the most important points that we took away from the document itself. We can have that available if need be. Marty, I don't know how you want to go forward. If you'd like to, I see we have a hand raised. I don't know if you want to, bring people in and have them ask questions, and then between
Lisa, I'm happy to do that. I'm also happy to leave it to you and Julie to go through that. Yeah, instead of passing a baton back and forth, you folks have carried the ball this far. I'm comfortable with you continuing.
Okay, nope, that's perfect. Vanessa, thank you for doing the PowerPoint. If we could have it on standby in case we need to put it back up to answer a question. But could we bring Mr. Walter over? I see that he has a question. And Mr. Walter, welcome. If you could just unmute yourself, and we will do our best to answer your question or take your comment for consideration. Welcome, sir.
Well, my pocket raised my hand. I didn't intentionally bring anything to the party, but I think so. I live on Newton Street here, and I've lived in town my entire life. I've seen it go through a lot of changes, and changes happen, and sometimes staying in front of change is not the way that you need to make change, or preventing it doesn't help anything. So I think the biggest thing that is kind of discussed between myself and the neighbors is just responsibly developing it. And you've addressed some stormwater concerns, which is an ongoing battle here. And right here on the corner lot, that was the old gas station, is kind of the bottom of the sink and collects all the water. And I know that some local businesses here in the area also have water troubles. So there needs to be a very extensive and deeper water management plan than just kind of move stuff around a little bit. Let's push it out to the sides, because that's not only got us where we are today, but doesn't solve any of the longer term issues that some of us have. And further from there, lights. There are plenty of residents around here that have not only young kids, but also maybe they're elderly and like to go to bed at 7 o'clock and not 1 a.m. with the lights on, or any other number of light impacts. So some kind of responsible lighting that happens with some of these things needs to be taken into account. By and large, being called on unexpectedly. That's kind of all I come up with off the top of my head. But
Well, Mr. Walters,
these-
You know, an awful lot of things happened in 2020 that have focused our attention on the need to think even more carefully and more thoroughly about what sort of housing we as a community and larger provide. And so that's part of the discussion. That's why SHOPC has been so important in these discussions. Now that's on the zoning side of things. Obviously, it doesn't make any sense and it really wouldn't work to try to enhance the zoning side of things without making sure that the infrastructure for that area is not as top-notch as we can possibly get it. And that's why the DPW, that's why the Main Street project existed, to get us to the lip of the actual downtown. And that's why there's a project that was approved by the Board of Selectmen a couple of years ago to extend that down through the actual downtown area. And there's not been a word that's been uttered in talking about that hasn't said that a big focus of that has to be dealing with the drainage, stormwater issues. Sorry, I went on for a little bit, but we hear you.
Okay, and Julie, I'm just going to go to you if you have anything that you want to add to that, or if you think we covered.
No, I think you covered it. We've certainly heard that before, and I think I can probably speak more to the lighting than the drainage issue, although that certainly we understand that is an issue, and that, you know, obviously engineering experts need to be involved to make sure that drainage is appropriate and that we're not causing more problems. But as far as lighting, I mean, that's why zoning bylaws and design guidelines are important, because we can use those documents to restrict in certain ways to make it to make sure that we're not hurting the immediate abutters when we're trying to make these improvements.
Right. Okay, Mr. Walter, thank you. Do you have anything further you'd like to add?
No, I mean, change is coming. I was put on the spot, and that's the best that I could do. So thanks for hearing me, and you'll be
very impressive for being put on the spot.
Thank you. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Pleasure. Good luck.
Thank you. Vanessa, Tom Gittens has a hand raised. Can we bring Mr. Gittens over, please? Good evening, Mr. Gittens. I see you're unmuted. Welcome, and we would love to hear from you. Can you hear us, Mr. Gittens? We can't hear you. You appear to be unmuted, but I can't hear you. Can you mute and unmute? Sometimes that I found in the past that's helped. I still have nothing from you at this point. Mr. Gittens, we will keep you on standby if we can find a way, or maybe even if you get out and get back in as a suggestion, and you know, we'll come back to you. So Vanessa, can you bring Mr. Miller over? Good evening, Mr. Miller. Welcome. You are unmuted.
Hi there. And thanks for holding this meeting. I just have a question about the drawing of the district map itself. And the question partly evolves from the map that I had previously seen online differs from the printed map in the packet that landed on my doorstep this past weekend. And I'm particularly interested in an explanation about what I would characterize as the southern and western boundaries of this map. The way I see it, it runs through from Park Street, runs toward the south through private backyards at 10, 12, 14 Lattisquama, extends all the way a full quarter of a mile from Main Street to Foley Drive, before running, and encompasses, for instance, the property at 25 Park Street. And I'm a little baffled as to why this district, you know, the inclusion of stuff along Main Street and Boston Road and Newton Street seems to me self-evident, but I'm a little confused why the inclusion of property so far from a viable commercial center of the town is included, particularly when Park Street, apparently there's a right of way extending past the existing roadway at this point, but it's hard to see what the motivation is to include land all the way up to Foley Drive in this proposal.
Sure, Mr. Miller, first I think we're going to
be done with it.
Sure. I think we're going to bring the map back up. Vanessa, can you go back to the presentation and share to the map? The map that this current map that's shown, that is what the current downtown business village district is. We're not looking to change what the current district zoning is. We're just looking to change the uses within the district and to create a new district. Julie, do you want to jump in on that? I don't know what other maps have been presented, so. You're muted, Julie. Sorry, Julie, you're still muted.
Sorry, Lisa.
That's okay.
Yeah, I'd be curious, and Mr. Miller, if you want to follow up with us after, I can try to figure that out. This is the current zoning bylaw map, and I did ask because I agree with you. I looked at this and said, why is the commercial property, dividing the dividing those back lots there. And, it's been like this for a long time. I'm trying to remember the answer. There was a somewhat, at least reasonable answer that I got from our zoning consultant. And it had something to do with I'm trying to remember what it was, but it was a certain amount of space from the road or something like that. I know that's not a great answer, but, yeah, as Lisa said, we're not looking to change the area at this point, although I agree there's, if we were drawing it up fresh from scratch now, that's not how I would draw it either. But obviously those back residential lots, they're part of residential lots, and obviously they're not developable back there in any reasonable sense. So, Park Street is an area that we're looking at. But yeah, I agree with you. I'm sorry I don't have a better answer, but I am curious as to whether there are different maps floating around. But this is the one that is the current zoning bylaw map.
Thank you for the explanation. The only comment I would make is, I wonder if there ought not to be some consideration of redrawing the map if you're going to rezone the district, because the concern is from the butters, and I happen to be one of them, is that it opens up seemingly property to all kinds of uses that are just wholly inappropriate. If you're going to overlay new criteria for development over an old map, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. But I thank you for the information.
And sir, thank you. And this is something that certainly we can bring forward as we go through the planning board public hearings as well. That's what this forum is about. It's discussions just as these that, hopefully we can all work together and make downtown better for everyone. So thank you very much for your comment.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Vanessa, can we bring in Diana Bell, please? And we'll go back to Mr. Gittens next. Good evening, Ms. Bell. Welcome. We are interested to hear your thoughts, comments, questions, whatever you have for us tonight.
Yes, thank you. I'm pretty new to town. We just bought a house and closed in January. So
welcome.
Very excited to be part of this. I'm kind of curious about the consideration for the types of businesses, just from past experience and living in places that are closer to Boston when development has happened. I think banks make good tenants, but not always good community. So I'm just wondering if there's like consideration for limits on businesses like that.
So Vanessa, can we go back to the by right use, Julie? The by right use page?
Yeah, I think it's the fourth to last slide.
Yeah, I think that's the slide that
that's helpful, Vanessa. That's a great comment, and I agree with you. They make excellent tenants, but I don't know how much control we can put in as far as having limits on numbers. I haven't heard of zoning bylaws doing that, but I'm not sure. That is a good question, but I agree with you. Having a healthy ecosystem of a diversity of businesses is something that's important. Obviously, we already have 2 banks downtown. There actually used to be a 3rd bank downtown that left last year. So I think that's a great comment, and maybe that is something we can consider. So we can certainly bring that question back to our consultant. I think I neglected to say that during this process, we had gotten some grant money and hired a zoning attorney and a zoning consultant to help with us in our research. So we can certainly bring that. Our zoning consultant is incredibly experienced, and we can certainly bring that question to her and see if there's any way to encourage or preserve a certain mix of tenants. And see if there's a way to encourage that.
Yeah. All right.
Great question. Thank you, and welcome to town.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome to town. Let me just throw this out. Is there any other members of the board that may want to respond to this before? And if not, great. Diana, do you have any other questions for us?
No, that was great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And again, welcome to town, as Julie said. Mr. Gittens, can we hear you this time? We still cannot.
He typed a question in.
Yeah, Lisa,
He
you
did.
had typed a question.
Okay,
Go ahead, Chelsea.
go ahead, Chelsea. Thank you.
He said, you talked about stormwater. Can the town help with wastewater? Isn't it the big issue?
I'm happy to talk about that, Lisa, if you want me to start.
No, go ahead. You can start. That's fine.
So that's a really great question. And also that was the sort of second prong of what was identified as one of the impediments to development, because obviously we're currently on a septic system downtown. The businesses and residents there all have their own private septics. It's a big expense. It takes up space. Is there a way that we can do something different? So I could also, I don't know if Claire Reynolds is in the audience, but she's been looking into this, working with the EDC on this, and we've actually put out some, she can clarify me if I misspeak, but we've put out an RFP to contract to have a feasibility study done. We've actually gone to other towns because, we're trying not to reinvent the wheel there. Like Southborough is one of many New England communities that was built over the past, 250 plus years, close to 300 years, and built slowly and starting at a time when there weren't such things as sewer. So as we've developed, but now we have roads and buildings that obviously already have different systems. So how have other communities dealt with this, and have they been able to put together a cohesive system that supports a small downtown? And there certainly are ways that can be done. There might be grant money that's available to help us. It might be something that a private developer, if they're working on a project, might consider doing. Absolutely, but I think the next step is to do a feasibility study to kind of see what options are available and what sort of fits physically, and what that could support. But that's a great question.
Yeah, and also, Tom, just so you know, so the board had on our consent agenda tonight to approve the award the RFPs that came in, but we just needed some additional information. So at our next meeting, the board will be awarding the contract for the wastewater study. So just keep following this, and know that it is certainly being worked on in conjunction with the downtown. So thank you very much for your question. I see we have a lot of people here. Does anyone else have any questions?
Actually, Lisa, can I just tag on to one comment on the wastewater?
Yes, please.
Because I think it's important that the study for the wastewater be concurrent with this process. Because I've heard some people say that, the infrastructure ought to be in place to support these mixed-use developments coming in. And the other side of that is, how do you know what to design the wastewater system for unless you know what is coming in? So it really is important that they both be on a parallel track and move forward the way that we are undertaking this. But certainly the wastewater component is a big concern, and it is an integral part of this project.
Brian, I think that's a great point, but I don't know that we need to know exactly what's coming in to do a feasibility study. I agree they should happen concurrently, but we know generally based on what's there and what the maximum of what we're proposing could even take up as far as what's required. So I think that we can certainly move forward having some idea of what we're looking for, and to see what the options are. But yes, concurrently is great because they certainly go hand in hand.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Any other comments from the board, Chelsea?
Yes, Mr. Gittens has put some more comments into the chat. So would you like me to read them?
Sure, please. Thank you.
Okay, so he said, thanks. And I don't see a public house/pub on the list of by right. And would the selectmen grant a liquor permit?
So bear with me 2 seconds. Julie, you can jump in on this as well.
Sure.
I'm trying to pull the actual zoning document up. So
yeah, I think brewery as a use.
Yes.
Brewery, which is brew pub. So that is one of the by right uses that would be permitted, along with restaurants. And we've had discussions with the Board of Selectmen in the past about maybe getting to a point where we even reserve a I would love to see this anyway. I'm not saying they've committed to this, but even reserving a liquor license or two specific for the downtown, if that's something that's possible.
I have no comment on that. But thank you for the comment. So, and Stanley Radler, can we try to bring, and again, I can't see if he's here. Okay. Mr. Radler, can you hear us? We cannot hear you. I see that you're unmuted. We still cannot hear you.
Lisa, while Mr. Radler is
Yes.
hopefully resolving the, again, I feel your pain. I had my 22-year-old daughter home for a while, and she set everything up for me. So as long as I don't touch it, I'm good. But a question I hope I know the answer to. But one of the suggestions or comments that I've heard is that this zoning bylaw will open the floodgates for much larger, much different buildings that are currently allowed in the downtown area. And obviously that's something that was discussed an awful lot during our combined meetings during the fall. If you or Julie wanted to address that comment and whether or not, in fact, this does open the floodgates to buildings that we're just not used to, and I think a lot of people wouldn't want to see in the downtown district.
So, Julie, I'll go first, and then you certainly can jump on. So, it certainly is going to be different in the downtown in the respect that currently you have a lot of one-floor buildings with all your commercial use on the ground floor. You're now allowing for diversity in housing, which is what is subscribed to in the master plan. So yes, you could be looking at a two-story building with an apartment or two or three, or even four, on the second floor, depending on the size of the lot and the size of the building. So in that respect, yes, you could start seeing some two-story buildings like you find in a lot of downtowns in related towns similar to ours. I think that's the main difference that you're going to find is to be able to have a little bit of diversity in housing. And Julie, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think, what we're looking at is laying the groundwork for a vision of what we see in downtown. And when we look at the then and now pictures that were at the beginning of this presentation, we do see a diversity in architecture. We do see a diversity in structure. We see a diversity in height. Some of those buildings were quite tall. I think that from the feedback that we've gotten, the research that we've done, people are looking to see a little bit more, but obviously they also love Southborough and they love that small town feel. And I think that, that's something that everyone wants to preserve. Also, practically, we're really constrained by the physical space. Like if you look in that pink area on that, which, as was pointed out, part of it is not even usable for any real commercial purposes. There's very little space, and if you look at what's already there, we're not, there's not a lot of area, a lot of parcels that are even, available for any sort of development or redevelopment purposes. So, and I think that's why the combination of the zoning bylaw and the design guidelines really will structure all the, be the structure of what we want to see going forward. And, the EDC engaged an architect a year or two ago to put together some renderings of sort of to put our vision to paper and make it something that people could see as visual. So those are available online. I'm happy to share them with you if you reach out to me or to Marika. We can share those. But, it's what our vision is very much in line with what's already there. Just a little bit more diversity in what uses are there. There aren't a lot of developable lots. So, when we spoke with our zoning consultant and we spoke with our attorney, we said, this is what we want. This is what, the people in the town want. Help us craft a zoning bylaw and design guidelines that will result in this. So that was sort of our mission.
And I think to add, Julie, as well, that, a good zoning bylaw will enhance the vision that you have. It will restrict the, skyscrapers from coming downtown, which I think is something that none of us really want to see. It just gives the opportunity for a vision that we subscribe to. And we'd like to see in our downtown, more like what we saw, as Julie said, in the before and after pictures. You picture a vibrant downtown as some place that has some form of walkability and a gathering place, a social place, for families. And our downtown just doesn't have that enough now. So this opens the door to possibilities. And I think that's for me, the most important thing about this bylaw is it gives us possibilities. It gives us an opportunity for change and an opportunity for also diversity in housing, which, is important. I mean, you want foot traffic downtown, an apartment or two, workforce people that may work downtown and live downtown. So again, I think it's possibilities, and that's what these public hearings are about. I think that's what makes it so important, is to hear feedback from the community to make sure that we do this and we do this right. I mean, this is something that will live for generations beyond most of us. So,
Lisa?
Yes, Sam.
I'd throw in a comment
Sure.
following up on Marty's question. I think the way you control density through here is what we proposed through the floor area ratios.
Yep.
The lots downtown are relatively small, so that limits what one can build there. And the numbers we're talking about here, between 0.35, as Lisa suggested, up to 0.5 with the special permit from the planning board. If you look around other communities, there are a lot of places that have much larger floor area ratio limits. It creates a lot more density. And so I think the thought is that we're being pretty careful and conservative in terms of managing that density possibility that way. And again, that gives you the ability to determine how much density you can pack on a particular lot, particularly if it's a small lot. If you had a 3-acre lot, you could build a pretty big building on it, but there are not many big lots in that particular part of town. So that's the intent there, I think.
Thank you, Sam. I think that's a great perspective. I'm just going to veer for 1 second. Marty, we had a comment from the Radlers, and it actually had to do with the poll. I don't know how you want to address that in the chat. So,
why don't we, let's finish this and we can loop back and
Okay.
Unfortunately, we're not going to have the gentleman from Mass Electric on the line. It's a shame we couldn't make that connection at the time.
Yep.
But we'll attempt to address it when we finish the forum, but I don't want to divert the direction we're going in.
Okay. So that being said, do we have any other questions, any other comments? Just everyone to please keep in mind as well, the planning board hearings start February 22nd. So this isn't the only opportunity you'll have to ask questions to anybody that may be in the audience right now.
Lisa, there's another question from Mr. Giddens in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and read that.
Please, if you want to read it, Chelsea, I missed it. Thank you.
Will existing buildings be grandfathered regarding the ratios of building to green space, like Knights of Columbus?
Yes. Yeah, existing buildings will be grandfathered in. This would be for new projects or redevelopments going forward.
Yep.
Good question.
Mary Quirk, sorry, Mari Quirk. I hope I'm not saying that wrong. Can we bring them over, please? Good evening, welcome. How would you like us to address you? Is it Mari, Ms. Quirk, Mr. Quirk?
It's Mary Quirk and Henry Large, and we live at 11 East Main Street.
Okay,
So
welcome.
we're abutters who are kind of not considered that, unfortunately. But we're the bottom of all the hills that have been impacted by the water difficulties that exist in our area of town and residentially. But most of all, our downtown area is just atrocious, and you guys know that. And I know the selectmen are fighting with CSX to help us not have such an ugly downtown. And I understand all the wastewater concerns because they're extreme, but infrastructure is where this is at. And I think that when we talk about the vision of all of this, we certainly, as an older category of people in Southborough for 50 or 60 years, we certainly value our neighborhood. And there's only one piece of land in downtown district that can have a brew pub on it. Am I correct? Peter Bemis's lot, the former gas station, which in the planning board meetings a year or so ago, everyone expressed their extreme concern over this large building set on the road and parking and all these things without all the basic infrastructure getting appraised and fixed, because the groundwater situation is extreme. And the businesses that exist down there are barely making it in the COVID-19 or prior to this, because let's face it, no one encouraged them to do better. No one encouraged downtown to do better. So now I'm just going to say that until someone really figures out the answer to the groundwater downtown, I cannot see a big building on the corner of Newton Street and Main Street setting the pace to what I believe, Julie, the image of us having a beautiful, workable family town. You know, we need more parks, we need more walkways, we need bike paths, we need major infrastructure, we need roads you can drive on, and we need sidewalks you can walk on. And we've all seen the difference as to what happened, you know, up in the other, when they did just completed the sidewalks and everything. You know, we need this. And we also need to be respected as a residential community surrounding all of this. Park Street, Main Street, East Main Street, Lyman Street, Winchester, we're all residents here with houses and families. And we are a mixed neighborhood of young people and older. So please, you know, take this into consideration, and we appreciate everything that you all do. But we need some other DPW help, we need some MDC help, and we need CSX to step up.
Great, Mary, thank you very much for your comments. As we had said earlier, Mr. Healy had alluded to, you know, some of the work going on and discussions that are going on with CSX to make our downtown, you know, a better place and add more sidewalks. I know the project, when it gets moving, as it goes past Park Street and around the train tracks, there is more walkability. There's going to be sidewalks that are involved in that as well. So, and I think we hear you. If you take anything from this tonight, just know that we hear you, we hear your concerns. And, as we move forward with this, that was the point of the forum. We wanted people to step forward, good, bad, or whatever, and everything that you've just said will certainly be taken into account. Julie, do you want to add anything?
I agree. I really appreciate your comments, and and I'm not sure if I hope you got one of the packets of information where we've been really trying to make sure that the residents have been informed and reaching out to people however we can. Particularly the residents who live downtown. We fully understand that you're also a neighborhood of people who live there full time. So, and the stormwater issue is certainly not my area of expertise, but we've been in touch with DPW. I know the Board of Selectmen has prioritized this and is working on it. We hear this, I don't live right downtown, but I've, even driving through, you can't not notice that that's a problem. And I've heard from plenty of residents how it's impacting them. So I completely agree with you. It's something that we need to deal with.
Thank you.
And I think I'm hoping that the road construction project that the first phase was just completed. I'm hoping that's sort of the beginning of really uplifting that whole stretch and that whole area.
Thank you, Julie.
I would like to make one more comment.
Sure.
As the neighborhood surrounding all of this, I really fear the by right uses being opened with so few restrictions after having seen the complete lack of any kind of specifics as to what kind of building was going to be built. We talked about in the planning board meetings about downtown, and they were wonderful about trying to define anything. If we just open this up, I don't know who else made a comment on this tonight, but we are opening the floodgates for you guys, for you younger people. The floodgates are going to open, and we just may step on our own toes, and in the process of it, destroy the neighborhoods surrounding it all. So that's my last comment, and
Mary, again, thank you. If you hold on a second, I just want to open it up, and if there's any board members that want to maybe add something to what Mary has said.
I guess I'll weigh in, and one of the reasons I asked the question I did earlier about the floodgates is because I don't think it's the case. And I think to me the important thing about the of right uses is for the town to give an indication that these are the sort of businesses and these are the sort of uses we would like in the downtown area. And obviously we want to hear from people if there are missteps in those identified uses. If you think there are some that are in there and shouldn't be because they will adversely affect the character of downtown, or if you think there are some that aren't in there and should be in there. Yeah. Believe me, those are. It's the reason we did this forum. It'll be part and parcel of the hearings before the planning board. Are there things that we're missing? Are there things that we've included in here that the folks in Southborough think shouldn't be in there? I can't raise that to a more important level. It's so important to hear that. We don't want to decide that. We have views about it, each and every one of us, as each and every one of you do. But we want to hear are we getting this right about those uses? We really need to hear from folks on that. For me, the more important thing in terms of the look of downtown isn't the types of businesses. That's a separate question about the character of again, what sort of businesses you want in downtown. To me, the issue of the building size, I really think is addressed in this zoning article. And I don't think, as Lisa said, yeah, you could have a 2-story building. I don't think anybody has a problem. We've got some 2-story buildings down in the downtown district now, both homes and businesses. But what this doesn't allow is unfettered development. It doesn't allow large, sort of block office buildings with no green space and that's a very important piece of what this zoning does. If you don't think, again, if folks don't think that it does enough, I think it does. But if folks don't think that it does enough to limit the size of buildings and otherwise, that's why we're having this forum. We're going to have other forums as well. That's why the planning board is required to, but also why they're having their hearings, because if those sort of things are important to people, then people have to let us know, because this can be changed. The zoning article is not set in stone. If there are improvements to it, then let's improve it. But again, one of my phrases is that, let's not let the perfect get in the way of the good. If folks think that there's a way to revitalize, and a lot of people do, downtown with uses, with architectural designs, with zoning, then let's do it and try to improve downtown. The fact that that's being done doesn't mean that infrastructure isn't going to be developed. And I'm going to talk later on, not as part of this forum, about the CSX infrastructure issue, which Board of Selectmen is going to have to make a decision about that. But again, we want to hear from people. This is not a Board of Selectmen, EDC, Planning Board, whatever production. Here's what we've come up with. Tell us yes or no. No, this is, do you think what we've come up with is a good idea? Why? What do you think should be changed? How can we make it better? And let's get this thing right.
Very well said, Marty. Very well said.
Thank you.
And Mary, also, the planning board hearings start the 22nd.
Yeah.
You can certainly go to those as well and raise some of the points. I know there's planning board members in the audience tonight, that are hearing some of your concerns now.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for giving us your feedback and your concerns.
And Lisa, the last thing I'll say is I live right around the corner from Mary, and she's absolutely right about that neighborhood. It couldn't be better.
Yes, Marty.
Wonderful, Mary. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Mr. Litt has his hand up. Can we please bring Mr. Litt in? Good evening, Mr. Litt. We know your audio works, so please, you have the floor.
Well, thank you. It's nice to have it work once in a while. I just wanted to make a comment on the whole floor area ratio metric. It strikes me that it's really an awkward tool for trying to address what you're trying to address. I mean, as I understand it, the real issue that people have is, how much of a lot does a building occupy? Do we have open space on the lot? Is there room for parking? Those sorts of things. And as the graphic showed, when you just do a floor area ratio, you get these extremes of, a building that covers a whole lot or a building that covers a third of the lot. And it seems to me that we ought to look for a different metric. I mean, from my point of view, not being an expert in this, it seems logical to say, look, take the exterior walls of the building and say that, they can't occupy more than X percentage of the lot, whether it's 1 story or 100 stories. And then say, we won't have buildings more than 3 stories in the area. That seems like a more straightforward way of expressing what you want to do, rather than this density focused thing, which I think makes more sense in a downtown area than where we live and where we're trying to get things to work. I mean, I think you're really trying to twist the floor area metric into doing something that it isn't designed to do, and I don't think it's really good at least as I understand it. So I'd encourage you to look for a different way of expressing what you want. And I think what you want is, you want the buildings to fit on the lot. You don't want them to overhang the lot. You don't want them to occupy 100% of the lot. And, you don't want a Walmart superstore size, thing downtown.
Okay,
That's
Julie,
my 3 cents.
Go ahead, Julie. I see you're looking to comment, so go ahead.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you, Mr. Litt. That was, without playing favorites, that was one of my favorite comments tonight. I think you make an excellent point. And I agree with you. And maybe I have a note now to go back to our zoning consultant and talk to her about this. Maybe it's not the right metric. And I think the point of it, as you alluded to, is to control density, but where the area is so small already, and whether, as Mary pointed out earlier, Ms. Quirk, that there are so few places that are even developable, really, maybe this isn't the right metric for this space. And, I have noticed that not every downtown zoning bylaw has an FAR, maybe a height requirement, a building height / floor level requirement, plus a footprint ratio is sufficient. So I think that's a great question. I think I agree with you. And, I don't know how, of course, we need to discuss it with the other boards and committees, but I'd support that. And I would certainly love to hear what our zoning consultant has to say about that as well.
Thank you, Julie. And Tim, I also agree. Again, that was the whole point of these forums, was to be able to have these discussions, to be able to go back to the consultant and, get clearer feedback on, why this was the path that she chose. I know we had discussed this with her at, the forums we had with the joint meetings we had with other boards. But certainly it's a valid question, Tim, and one of many that we're hoping to take back. I know Planning Board had some questions as well. So we will certainly add this to the list. So thank you.
Seems there was maybe a comment in the chat from one of the audience members about that pertained to this as well.
Okay. But also account for green space. I agree that could be a little funky, but it does height requirement footprint take into account parking lots that eats up green space. So one of the requirements, and I'm just trying to pull the actual zoning document that we have, has a requirement that a minimum landscaped open space, we're looking to change that to green space. So at least 50% of the landscaped open space / green space shall be contiguous and located between the front building line and front lot lines unless the planning board approves a different placement. So it currently requires 20% for green space within this. So Julie, you can expand on that, but I think we've somewhat addressed that through what we currently have in the draft.
Yeah, I think that's right, Lisa. We're prioritizing green space and making sure also that visually the parking is not in the front. We want green space in front of any structure that's there with parking in the back or elsewhere.
Yeah. Any other board member wish to comment on that? Or I feel bad. I just keep kind of going by everybody and I don't intend to. Chelsea, did you have something?
Not on this particular comment, but we missed a prior comment from the audience.
Oh. Caitlin Boland?
Yes.
Okay. How will this impact the traffic on East Main Street and other streets neighboring downtown? People tend to be using East Main Street more and more as a cut through. So I'm not quite sure how to answer that.
Yeah, no, that's a good question and certainly, a valid concern from the abutters. Just so you know, one other piece that we are focusing on is increasing walkability and connectivity. Yeah. That was when we first started talking about this right after, that was a question we addressed a lot in the study. I know it's something the Master Plan Committee is working on as well. The Trails Committee is, in our town, is very active and engaged. And, what I would love to see is other ways that we can get to downtown, and that includes expanding on sidewalks around downtown. It includes bike. We talked about having bike paths, bike parking, or bike places to lock your bike, and things like that. Again, whereas the space is already so small and already almost completely occupied, I can't imagine that there would be any significant impact. We could always, there are traffic studies and things that could be done. But there's just not a lot of space to put a lot more. It's more identifying what uses we want and what's available, and it might be one or two more, business areas. But I can't imagine it would have a significant impact on traffic. But certainly that's something to keep on our radar.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, Julie. I think, our downtown area is so small, and a good portion of it is made up of residential homes at this point anyway. So just increasing some of the business, there may be an increase in traffic, and there may be, I'm sure the businesses downtown would love to see some form of increase in traffic, especially during COVID. I know Chairman Healy is a big proponent of bike bike trails and bike paths. So,
Well, the other thing is, Lisa, and you and Julie both touched on this, and yeah, and shame on me for not putting, forming the bike committee as an agenda item. We will get to that. But the question of traffic and pass through is I think independent of this, because what we are talking about and what this zoning is geared towards accomplishing is people not driving through downtown, but driving to downtown. Yeah. I mean, I think most folks would think that's a good thing to bring some vibrancy. We've talked about, sort of not just from the bike perspective, but bringing in discussions with folks from the, our incredibly active and successful arts people, which is another drum I've beat. They've done a terrific job with some events that have brought, vibrancy and activity to the area up at the Route 30, Route 85 intersection, where there was stuff going on at the library and the townhouse and the community house at the same time, and extending that sort of connection to the downtown area. And I guess just someone mentioned earlier the Main Street project. You knew I'd bring that up eventually. But all of this is tied together. The golf course, which had such a successful year, and which has got a clubhouse down there that during the pandemic obviously couldn't do a whole lot, but I think is going to become a small little, community gathering place, not just as a, 19th hole, but it's such a nice location and looking out over a terrific vistas, connecting that up to a downtown area that's more vibrant, more walkable, more easily accessible with bicycles. I mean, this isn't just, although it's importantly about zoning in downtown, but at least from my perspective, and I think based on our conversations, it's about a much bigger thing than that. It's about making Southborough, green space is important, because green space means people want to come there. It means people want to walk there. It means it's a location both for kids and for adults in their crazy bicycle shorts to bike into the area. I mean, it's a much bigger picture than just let's improve the zoning in the downtown district, but improving the zoning in the downtown district is a really, really important element of that.
okay. Thank you, Marty. We actually have another comment. So many comments, questions from me. Sorry. Never be sorry, Diana. Curious if, with the arts, is there any consideration for collaboration across the various town departments? Would be cool to see murals downtown. Very excited about the proposed history walk. Would love to see more community downtown with art and bike paths too. So I think that kind of touches on what you just said, Marty.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think all of these things feed off each other, because they all, you think about arts, you think about trails, like what our vision, we kept calling, we're the economic development committee, but especially when we think about downtown, we think about community development. And so many people talk about economic, businesses, not for the sake of, because I really want this type of restaurant, but because they want to be in their community and they want a place to go where they'll see their friends and neighbors. And, we've talked about outdoor space that could potentially be working with the arts community, where maybe we could do summer concerts or shows or plays and other opportunities. And I think once we light that fire, I think the rest will come. I think that if we have a vibrant downtown, all of those elements are going to naturally fall into place and come together and, feed off of each other. And I think that's what we're going for. I feel like that's a little bit about what's been missing, even though we've got some really good businesses down there.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Is there any other board member that might want to chime in? I know I haven't really gone around. Okay, so is there anyone else that would like to comment? And again, keep in mind, you'll have plenty of opportunity to comment at the planning board meeting on the 22nd. I think our main goal in doing this was to kind of get out ahead of the planning board meeting and to be able to share information with you and to be able to hear some of your concerns. I think some wonderful points, great points were made tonight that, we can take as we go forward with this. There is opportunity to change what we have. I think we're all open to wanting to find what's best for the downtown and for the citizens, and what everybody's looking for. And I think tonight was a fabulous first start. I couldn't be happier with the number of people that have turned out, with the questions, the well thought out questions that were asked, and even the concerns as well. So going on that, I will do one more round. If anyone has anything they'd like to add, you please feel free to raise your hand.
Lisa, can I just
Absolutely, sure.
Can you just outline kind of what the next steps are? I know that planning board opens their hearing next week. Can you kind of go through what will occur after that?
Sure. So the planning board will start their public hearings next week. Planning board will also have the opportunity to comment further on the document. Typically, they will open the hearing at all of their meetings going forward. So it's not just the 22nd or the meeting after or the meeting after. A lot of times you find as you get towards the end of the public hearing process, sometimes there's not as much comments or feedback. And what the board has the opportunity to do is to listen to that feedback, take feedback from planning board as well, and see if there's any changes that we need to make prior to town meeting in advance of that. Julie, am I missing anything?
No, I think that's right. And, the goal would be to hopefully bring bring an article to town meeting. And this is no small task. It's taken a lot of work to get just to where we are, and we still have a long road ahead. And then because it's a zoning bylaw, we have to get 2/3 majority vote at town meeting. So we still have a lot of work to do to make sure that we have this right and we have something that people want to support.
And another thing I'll add too is if somebody may be watching this after the fact, because we love the world of Zoom, that we can go back and watch meetings. So if anybody is watching this and has any questions or comments they'd like to share with either the Board of Selectmen or the EDC, you certainly have the opportunity to do that even before the planning board meeting up until town meeting. I mean, we certainly I think the goal of this is to all work together to come up with something, and that's the only way that it's a success. So I would recommend anybody to feel free to reach out to any of us. We're all pretty accessible. So one more question, Mr. Gittens. I don't know if we can hear you. I don't know if it's something you want to type. Are you there? Try this one more time. Still cannot hear you. Tom, would you like to just, here we go. Is there any economic development money available to businesses? Tom, is that specific to the downtown? And Julie, you can certainly speak to that more so than
Sure.
myself.
So the Economic Development Committee, obviously, we have a pretty small budget from the town that we work with. Most of us are volunteers. We have one paid employee, so we don't personally have money to hand out. However, we've been working very closely with the state. There is some grant money available to small businesses right now. And we've also been putting out information through COVID. There were several programs for businesses that we were connecting with the business community in Southborough to make sure everyone had the information they need. But if you do have specific questions, or if anybody listening has specific questions, certainly reach out to Marika, because there are opportunities that we're helping to facilitate to make sure our businesses are supported, especially during this very difficult year for many businesses.
Great, Julie, thank you. So that being said, and I see no further comments, I would suggest, Mr. Healy, that we close the public forum out. And again, with thanks from the Economic Development Committee, the Board of Selectmen, for all those attended and for the great feedback and questions we got. So.
All right, Ms. Braccio, thank you very much. Ms. Connolly, thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very helpful. And obviously, as you said, Lisa, thanks particularly to the folks who participated, both listening in to get better informed, better educated about what the proposal is, and particularly to those folks who weighed in. And keep those cards and letters coming, because we want to hear what people think. All right, back to
Thank you.
Okay. Item 6 of our agenda. And I know there are at least a few members of the Capital Committee who are in our attendees. So can we bring over Jason? And I'm not sure if they're going to convene a meeting. I don't know if they have a quorum, but if they do, we'll bring over all the members and then discuss the South Union School next steps.
Marty,
Yeah.
Mr. Radler, I'm sorry, is still out there. He's just asking if one of us can follow up with him after the meeting about the poll hearing.
Oh, sure, Mr. Radler. Yeah, I apologize for that. Brian, do you want to, looking at his question, I don't know if you've taken a look at it, but I think if you have, I think the answer to his question is yes, that what is planned is a pole and guy jack. That's straightforward, not something more complicated. That's what I think I heard, but you hear things differently with your engineering ears. Did you hear the same thing?
Yeah, I did. And one of the other points that's in the question in the chat is it kind of implies that the pole will be put on the Radler's land. And as I understood it from the information presented by Mr. Galvin, that all the work would be within the town's right-of-way, and there would not be any work on private property as well. So
yeah, that was my understanding as well. And Mr. Radler, obviously you're welcome to reach out to me or any other members of the Board of Selectmen. The easiest route might be to go through Mr. Purple, the town administrator. If you don't get the answer you need from him, then reach out to us and we can weigh in. But again, also you can reach out to us. But I think what Mr. Shea just said is the same thing I heard, that it's going to be on town land, not on private land, and it's going to be the simple approach to relieving the stress on the system, not something more complicated than that.
yeah. And I did specifically ask if there was another service proposed, and they said no, that it is just support pole.
Okay. Mr. Malinowski, is it just you, or do we have a quorum of your committee?
Tough to tell because I can't see the participants.
Oh.
I don't know. I'll defer to Lisa.
No quorum. It looks like, Jason, it's only you and I.
Okay.
All right.
It's just the two of us.
Well, that makes things easier. All right. Do you want to give us a quick update? I think we know quite a few of the details, but exactly where we are and what next steps maybe you folks have been discussing and you want us to consider.
Yeah, so we honestly, Marty, haven't discussed much since we had our executive session meeting with all of you back in, I guess it was November, if I'm looking at the minutes correctly. I know your board authorized a perk test, and I think maybe Mr. Purple could probably outline what the findings were there. But I think what we are looking to do is obviously, this would be a Board of Selectmen sponsored article if you were to move forward. And especially with the delay in town meeting, really figure out whether if you are interested in pursuing a disposal, are you going to float it before town meeting and bring town meeting an offer? Or are you just going to go and get the authorization at town meeting and then conduct the offer process then? And I think the reason it's important to make the decision is capital is obviously wrestling with a lot of very tough decisions, both this year and in future years, to try and prioritize very real needs of certain departments. And obviously, if the town could generate, this one-time revenue to potentially offset some of the cost to minimize the impact of capital on the tax base, that would obviously be great. But obviously, there is an impact of disposing of a property, and all the factors should be weighed. But I think you all have discussed that at great length. So it's kind of just making sure we're not losing the momentum of the work that's been done over the last 9 months, and just deciding where you want to go amongst the five of you. But maybe have Mark start with what was done or not done and go from there.
Okay, I've got some thoughts, but I'm going to go around first and see. Maybe I'll start with you, Mr. Stivers.
Sure. I think that it makes some sense to float the project out there and see what interest there is in terms of potential acquirers and ideas for what people might want to do with it. I would think it'd be helpful to go to town meeting with something specific versus sort of a blank check request that, hey, we want to do this, and can you, give us authority to move forward as we see fit. So I don't know about the timing at this point. Sometimes it takes a while to get these things together. But again, given our earlier discussion about being able to have a little bit of time now before we have to finalize a warrant for town meeting, we could have maybe several months here to investigate this. I think that could produce some useful information. So I'd be in favor of moving forward with getting some bids.
Okay, Ms. Braccio?
Marty, I'm going to defer to the end, if at all, only because I'm on Capital.
That's
and
right,
I've
you're
been
on the
involved in
committee.
the discussion, so I'm just going to, for once, be quiet. So thank you.
Ms. Malinowski.
I agree with Mr. Stivers. I think, we can float it out there, see what we get, and make a decision once we see what the options are.
Okay, Mr. Shea?
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I'm just curious, Mark, do you have any sense at all for timeframes that would be required to comply with the procurement laws that come into play here? And is there a minimum amount of time that we would need to have proposals for the property out, et cetera? And certainly we would need to incorporate language in it so that an offer, if it were to be made, would be, good for a period of time to allow us a closing that would be after the town meeting as well.
So the only time frame off the top of my head with regards to procurement is going to be 30 days. So it has to be advertised for a minimum of 30 days on the state's bidding site. And beyond that, the conditions and everything else in that will be up to the board as to how you'd like to structure that.
Well, why don't we put this on for a full-throated discussion on our March 2nd agenda and carve out a path here. Mark, maybe between now and then, put together a timeline for what something like this might look like. So we'll have an idea about alternatives. And the other thing is the legislation just passed that talks about the requirement for zoning districts near mass transit, specifically near train stations, and how this might impact our approach to both thinking about, putting out feelers for the property, but also thinking about what might make sense for that property. Again, we're with the pretty clear message from the legislation that was signed, passed by the House and Senate and signed by the governor, was that towns are going to be penalized if they are not proactive with their zoning for districts that are near mass transit hubs, i.e. the Southborough train station. And it just is coincidental that we're talking about, a town-owned property that is certainly within hailing distance of the Southborough train station, and whether or not our approach to seeking proposals, marketing it, just thinking about it generally, how much, if at all, it should be impacted by that legislation. Because we're going to have to do something at most in the medium term, maybe even in the short term, so that the town doesn't get financially penalized because we haven't been proactive in taking that approach.
Marty?
Yes, Sam.
Offer a comment. I've actually been looking into some of that stuff as well, and it strikes me that the state and various towns are actually scrambling to figure out what that requirement actually means for people. And there's a lot of uncertainty around that, but I agree with you. I think this is a good opportunity to sort of get started on that process with a property that we could put out to market with some requirements around it to actually give us exactly what you're talking about here. In a perfect world, we would have some sort of a zoning overlay district or change that would then allow something like this, but it seems to me it's still pretty early in that process. Maybe town council or other legal experts who are following this closely might have some suggestions about what we could do to sort of parallel track here as far as zoning changes that would be consistent with an attractive use for this property. It'd be a shame to have to wait a year for another town meeting till we sort that out if we could figure out something that could be helpful in the short term.
Agree, and we're benefiting as much as anybody else from the fact that we're not going to be able to have a March 20th town meeting, because otherwise our March 2nd meeting would have looked very differently than it's going to.
Exactly.
So
okay.
okay.
Maybe there isn't a simple answer, but I'd sure like to look with somebody who's struggling with this and trying to work within the state requirements and fast track something here.
Jason, do you have a reaction to what I've suggested, which is putting this on for a full-throated discussion? And actually, we can put it on for a time specific and get your full committee here to or at least a quorum of them if possible to weigh in on the discussion as well.
I have no problem with that, Marty, and I think we already had to come back with the revisions to the capital plan anyways for that night. I guess we're meeting next week, so what I would like to at least walk away with tonight is, this is ultimately your decision, the 5 of you that are sitting here, in terms of what you want to do for town meeting. What exactly do you want capital planning to talk about and come back with, right? I think you've given Mark a little bit of homework, but obviously, every week that passes, it does, take away, potential opportunities instead of having to wait for another year to deal with this. Because as you know, there are some downstream implications, depending on where you all decide to go and ultimately what town meeting votes on.
Well, I'll jump in. I think, Jason, if I'm reading the room correctly, that there is, at least a medium, maybe even a strong appetite for finding out what this asset could do for the town in a sale. It is problematic, I think, in a lot of respects for the town to continue to operate there the way it has, just because of the amount of money that at some point is going to have to be put into that building for it to be to house town employees and other residents of town that are using the building properly. It's an old building, and old buildings need work. So it's an asset. It's an asset, and finding out how much of an asset and how that could play into our longer term capital needs is clearly there is an appetite for that, unless I'm completely misreading things, by our board. And I guess my view is I'd like to know what you guys think about that. You've had discussions about from an exploratory standpoint. Do you guys think that it makes sense? That does it make sense from a we've got different appraisal approaches. One with maintaining it, with the facade and with its historical significance. The other is without. And does it make sense to find out what the market is like for both of them, or do we not even want to go down one of those roads? So I guess I'd like to know the answers to those questions by folks on the Capital Committee. Maybe you already know some of those answers, but that's the sort of discussion that I'd be interested in having on March 2nd. And I guess I won't start with you. I'll start with Chelsea.
No. Actually, I have a question.
Okay.
So, if you wouldn't mind starting with me this time.
Okay.
So as based on what you said, would you be interested in having the Capital Committee explore? Obviously, there's going to have to be options thought out as far as the departments that are currently in that building. Is it something maybe between now and March 2nd, Capital could start exploring, what the options are to be able to come back to the board and give the board some thought? And Jason, please, if I'm speaking out of turn, please tell me.
Lisa, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think in a weird way, 98% of what this pandemic has done has been awful. 2% of it has been beneficial. And one of them is that if in a, for a certain amount of time, we had to relocate some town departments to some space, goodness knows there's a lot of space all of a sudden vacant in the town of Southborough. So I guess exploring that, I don't think you have to do a deep dive, and I don't think you'd need to do a deep dive, but having that information I think would be helpful. What other folks think? Yeah.
Agreed. I think there's actually an interesting question around the youth and family services space longer term in terms of does that belong in a town building or in a non-town building, given the type of business they're in. So I think that creates some more interesting possibilities for us to get ahead of that question as well.
All right, Brian?
No, I agree.
Okay. Okay. So yes.
Sorry, may I add one thing to that?
Sure.
I'd also like to add finding a location on the south side of town for a playground.
With a fence around it. A tall fence, 8-foot barbed wire.
Preferably a fence. But I just think that, that's important for the families in town. And I would hate to take away that asset and not having something on the south side. So if we can, I know Lisa's done a lot of work around parcels in town, and if we can kind of add that to the capital list to just explore what options exist, so at least we know.
And this is just, my kids were, it's been a long time since my kids were running around in playgrounds, but isn't there a and again, I'm not saying this is sufficient, but isn't there a playground at Finn?
There is, but you can't use it during the day. So if you have toddlers, you can't use it when there's school. That's the problem.
But we might make that a condition of development of that site if we were to sell that facility, to preserve a playground in that location, potentially.
So we've talked to Recreation about that already, because remember we did. So Marty, we can go back to Capital, but Capital has already voted to bring this to all of you. So I guess with all due respect, I think we're spinning in circles here.
When you say you voted on what, Jason? I'm sorry.
We brought this to the board back in August. For where do you want to go as the executives of the town? Right. We then commissioned the appraisal. We then commissioned the perk testing. We brought it forward because there's significant capital needs in FY23 that we really don't want to deal with. And that money is much better spent on many other uses in town, or going, maybe not just being spent, period. So that's why we keep coming back with it, because, ultimately, I think you either just need to decide to float it, and while it's being floated, explore these things like playgrounds and, where these departments could go temporarily or permanently. Obviously, the permanent discussion is ongoing as it relates to the school research subcommittee, but I think Capital has already said, let's bring it forward. Okay. It's just a matter of, I know Historic Commission sent a letter to all of you about their views on the facade. Youth and Family and Recreation weighed in on what they would need on a temporary basis. So we have everything we need. It's really just the appetite of the board. I get the whole zoning change, but we all know how long it takes to enact zoning change. So the question is whether you couple those together or not.
All right. Well, I guess what you're saying is that this is a 5-person discussion, not a 10-person discussion, and we can thrash through ourselves on March 2nd and see just how strong our appetite is based on all of these factors. Does that make sense?
I mean, Lisa, would you correct me if I'm wrong with any of that? But I think we've done everything we can on capital at this point.
No, without direction, absolutely, Jason. I completely agree.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Have you guys taken a position on whether or not you would, in terms of looking for a request for proposal, you would do it for both? In other words, you would include the possibility of the entire parcel going, and it can be used however a developer wanted to, or you want to limit it to just development that would maintain the facade of the school because of its historical significance?
We did not take a position on those two.
Okay.
We just took a position on the overall looking at the disposal options, but I can put it on the agenda for next Monday so Lisa can report back on the 2nd. Yeah,
I'd be curious, and even that you're not going to take a position, I'd be curious if that's where you end up.
Okay.
All right.
And I think to Sam's comment, the playground can be moved. Tim Davis has already assured us of that. So the question is, where would you move it? If we were to free that up for a building.
Okay. All right. Terrific. Anything else for Mr. Malinowski? All right. All right, we're going, this for our purposes is on our March 2nd agenda. All right, next item. Let's do the RFP for legal services, and Mark had asked me to do some additional drafting for it. Mark, I just didn't have the time to get to it. I apologize for that. I think for this, we've got, we're only in February. I think we've got a decent amount of time since appointments are done at the beginning of the fiscal year. Does anybody have a problem with me between now and the next meeting doing some additional drafting that Mark asked me to do and putting it on again for the March 2nd agenda?
No problem. I've got a few comments that I would like to put into the mix. Can I send you a red line?
Can you, are you asking permission?
Well, sort of.
Yeah,
Depends
sure.
on the answer.
That's fine.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, in all fairness, so Sam already provided a list of things that he was hoping would be in there. And Sam, I think most of your items are covered in that list.
You did pretty well. Conceptually, I'm on board, but
all right, why doesn't Mr. Stivers and anyone else who has a reaction send them to Mr. Purple? Mr. Purple will get that information to me, and my schedule is much better the next 2 weeks than it was the last 2 weeks.
If you prefer, I could nail it to your front door. That'd be easier.
No, that's I'm good. But then it wouldn't be redlined. I guess it could be hard copy redlined. Yeah. So, all right. So that's on for March 2nd, which is quickly filling up. All right. The last item before final public comment is the CSX issue. And I'm not going to give the background on it. I think everybody knows the background. But I had conversations with two different representatives of CSX. One is an operations project guy, and that's the individual who's been dealing primarily with Karen. Good discussion, and I'll fill in a little bit what from a project standpoint CSX's position is. But he also directed me to their real estate guy, and he filled in the blanks. And this is where we are. There are 4 landowners contiguous to the CSX property that goes through downtown Southborough. And I'll start in the northwest corner. That's Knights of Columbus. CSX has reached what seems pretty modest, and by modest I mean hundreds of dollars a year, leasing agreement with the Knights of Columbus that protects, in CSX's view, protects their interests, and from the Knights of Columbus views, allows them use and access to driveway and what they've used for their property. So the property owner in the northwest corner has been addressed by CSX and by the property owner to joint satisfaction. Put that to the side. Northeast corner, that's Mr. Bemis's property. I'm not even sure if he actually owns it, but he's got some sort of rights to it, and obviously he's got a lawsuit in land court, I guess it is, seeking to develop the or overturn a decision to develop the property. That being said, as I said to the folks from CSX, it's a vacant lot right now. I said, I can't imagine that CSX's view is that somehow something is encroaching on property that CSX claims. And they agreed with me on that. And obviously anything that is done with that lot, whether by Mr. Bemis or otherwise, any development is going to have to take into account the other property owner there, which is CSX. So there's no long-standing uses or anything like that impact. So as far as CSX is concerned, the northeast property is not an issue. 2 down, 2 to go. The Lamy property, southeast corner. Originally, there were discussions for a similar arrangement between that landowner, Mr. Lamy, and CSX, as happened with the Knights of Columbus. For whatever reason, Mr. Lamy decided that he didn't want to go that route and represented to CSX that they can assert their property rights there, and that they because of parking that's otherwise available, uses that are otherwise available. They don't need a leasing agreement in order to address their business's needs or otherwise. And so as far as CSX is concerned, the property owner there has represented to them that they're no longer going to be using the property. They don't have a problem with CSX asserting their rights in whatever form to that property. And so as far as CSX is concerned, and I'm assuming as far as Mr. Lamy is concerned, that property is not an issue. Now we're left with the property on the southwest side of the tracks, the cafe. When I was talking to the real estate, the gentleman from the real estate office, he read from me a work order. And it was interesting. I remember we talked about the police last time. The police that were involved with this are, and I guess it makes sense that such a thing exists, were the railroad police. CSX has their own private, I guess, is this flow out of, who were the guys back in the Wild West? The, what were their names? Pemberton, Pendleton, whatever. Anyway. Pinkertons, that's right, the Pinkertons. I don't know if it's still Pinkerton, but anyway, the police involved here are the railroad police, and apparently they gave notice to all the landowners. But since we're not talking about the one in the southeast corner, they specifically gave notice to that landowner that asserting CSX's property rights, that there's a trespass, and that they are going to they are first in verbally and in letter asserting their property rights. And then, and this is the work order that was quoted to me, they're going to put up a barrier there. They are going to block off where their land is. And the reason is they attempted, and they communicated to me the offer that's been made to that landowner for a similar type arrangement that was offered to Lamy and ultimately rejected because they weren't going to be using the property, that was offered to the Knights of Columbus and was accepted for in the hundreds of dollars leasing agreement for use of the property. That was rejected for whatever reason by that landowner. It's pretty clear that CSX has those property rights. I think I mentioned last time the notion of adverse possession is something that was floated, and that's something that was floated in conversation with the folks from CSX, communicated to them that there was an adverse possession that would result or could result in the property title of the property changing hands from CSX to a private landowner. I mean, I voiced the opinion last time that adverse possession is an incredibly steep hill to climb. Well, in Massachusetts, it's steeper than that because there's a statute that says no length of possession or occupancy of land which belongs to a railroad corporation by an owner or occupier of adjoining land shall create in him or in a person claiming under him a right to such land of the corporation. Now that's legalese. Well, basically what that says is you can't take railroad property by adverse possession. So independent of the steep hill to be climbed, there's a statute in Massachusetts that says you can't take property from a railroad by adverse possession. And in addition to that, the railroad has now asserted its right to the property, which it's entitled to do. So it's interesting because so much of what we heard tonight was about the infrastructure problems on Main Street. Those infrastructure problems, according to our DPW director, and I think Brian, I think you're in agreement with this, although you've not, explored it from the deep dive that an engineer would do, that it can't be done without the impacting CSX property, which means we, the town, need an easement in order to do that. CSX will give us that easement if, as part of the work we do on Main Street, we put in curbing that protects their property rights, which adversely affects the use of CSX's property that's been made for years on the cafe's property. but it's pretty clear when I've had a work order read to me, I'm not sure if they'd send me a copy, I didn't ask for it, but that property is going to be blocked off regardless. Either CSX is going to do it because they have the legal right to do it, or the town is going to do it as part of a project in Main Street. With the second one, the town doesn't get to address its infrastructure needs. In other words, if we simply say, fine, we're not going to request an easement from CSX for this property, we're not going to get involved in this dispute. Then the CSX is going to assert its property rights. They're going to block off that property. The use of that lot is not going to be able to be used for parking, or at least a significant part of it, and the town's not going to be able to address its infrastructure needs. Or the town can get the easement from CSX with the agreement to put in curbing that protects its property rights and get the work done that needs to be done on the infrastructure that everybody before tonight, but everybody tonight punctuated, needs to be done downtown. That's where things are with information from CSX. It's not an easy decision, but at least in my view, it's a pretty straightforward decision. And any other thoughts, comments, discussion?
What is the next step if we actually decide to proceed in that direction with getting the CSX easement?
It's a pretty simple process. It is we reach an agreement for the easement, set out the details. I think Karen has already had discussions with them about what the contours of that agreement would look like. And again, they communicated it to us in the letter from either late summer or early spring that they would want. Do you remember the exact details? I haven't looked at the letter in a while, Mark. They wanted curbing put in there.
I think that was the biggest piece, Marty, is they wanted curbing just to protect their their property rights.
So have you discussed it?
Putting in the curbing defines where curb cuts are, where the openings are for the driveways into the abutting businesses. That's
yep. I don't see there's any, in my view, there's no reason why the town doesn't. I mean, it's a town issue. And I just think the town needs to address it, and it's a private dispute between landowners that can be resolved by one landowner leasing land from the other, and apparently declines to do so because they want to keep using it for free. It just seems a pretty straightforward call for me, but
so the. I think it's unfortunate. I think even with the easement that would have been granted to the southwest property, I think there still would have been a limitation on the ability to park vehicles in that particular area. I think what I'm saying is I think there needed to be more of an easement than what CSX was willing to grant to allow parking to continue as is in its current condition. And I'd say it's unfortunate that the two parties couldn't come to an agreement on that.
Brian, this is the real estate guy from CSX.
Yeah.
I honestly, I had to push him pretty hard on this because he did not want to revisit this with the landowner because of the nature of the previous discussions.
Yep.
I pushed him that CS, in other words, CSX's position is that we made a reasonable proposal. You rejected it in terms that we did not think were appropriate, and we're not going to revisit that. We are going to assert our property rights. That, before my conversation with CSX, was their position. I think I softened them a little bit in my conversation. I hope I did. But we the town, unless the town wants to pay somebody else's leasing agreement, which isn't an appropriate use of town resources in my view, or we want to try to take property from the railroad by eminent domain, which again, for the town to take land by eminent domain to benefit a private landowner doesn't make any sense either.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you. It's not an easy decision, but I think ultimately we have to put the interests of the town as a whole in light here. And so I think that I know that what I would do in this instance.
If Marty, if the easement were accepted by the property owner, would that change where we put curb cuts going down there?
Yeah, I think it would.
It would change it by 5 feet, right?
5 feet. So maybe again, I'm in agreement with Brian. I think what you're saying, Marty, is you got to take the interest of the town pretty high level here, and maybe another conversation with the property owner to say this seems to be the direction the board is leaning in. One last chance to do the deal and avoid a more difficult outcome for everybody here.
That's why I think it's important for the board to take a position, because right now it's soft. Yeah. And nothing's happening. But I think if we make it clear that this is the direction we're heading, and we are happy to help facilitate, whatever discussions we can with CSX to reach whatever is the best agreement that can be reached here. But I think it has to be backed up with, if an agreement isn't reached, this is what's going to happen.
Right. I'm on board with that one.
Well, at the end of the day, I think that there are far more properties and property owners that are adversely impacted by not addressing the infrastructure solution to that area than the one landowner on the southwest. So I think we need to take into consideration the impacts to all on this.
The greater good, as it were.
Lisa or Chelsea?
I agree. I know it's a real tough discussion to have, but I agree. If there's anything we can do in one more attempt to try to facilitate some form of discussion, I would be 1,000% in favor of that. And again, if that just doesn't work, Marty, I don't know that we have a choice. I am
happy to have the other side of the conversation, having talked to the folks from CSX. I have absolutely no relationship with Mr. Morrow. We've probably exchanged a few words during the course of our lives. Does anybody have a relationship with him that they think no? Okay. All right.
I think if we try that path, Marty, and we get nowhere, I think the path is pretty clear.
Okay.
As unfortunate as it is.
But I just wanted to, in my mind, have it pretty clear that is the direction that the board was strongly inclined to go. So I can communicate that.
Chelsea, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think to Brian's point, we have to take, the majority of property owners, and unfortunately, we can't just go with one.
Well, the other thing is, Chelsea, this property is going to get blocked off regardless.
Yeah.
Right.
That was made very clear to me by the folks from CSX. There's a work order that I convinced the guy to hold off on. They are going to block off this property. So it's a question of whether or not it gets blocked off and the town doesn't get to address its infrastructure needs, or it gets blocked off and we do. Or the ideal, the parties reach an accommodation.
Yeah.
Marty, can I ask one more question?
Yep.
So on the 5 feet that we're talking about, if the easement was achieved, would that allow enough parking to not lose spots, Brian?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I can't say definitively.
Okay.
But I don't believe the answer to the question is yes. I think that.
Okay.
I don't think it would. I got the sense that it would not provide all of the parking that currently exists, but would obviously provide
some
more potential for parking than if the complete property rights are asserted.
Correct.
Marty, you say block off. Does that mean access to the rear of the building would be blocked off, or there would still be a drive there, wouldn't there?
What the gentleman from CSX said to me is that the first step they take is they do it with a steel spikes and chain, so that you can't access the property. He said if that doesn't work, they'll put up Jersey barriers.
But would that again prohibit driving behind the building, Is there enough space for a drive there still, or is there?
I don't know. I
I
almost
think
went
there's
down
enough
there.
room for the drive. As I recall from the plans that Karen had shared with us a couple of months ago now, I believe there's room for the current cutoff of Main Street for vehicles to access the rear part of the building, but it's behind the building itself is where the parking would be uninhibited, unchanged from its current condition.
Right.
But the parking where people, face the railroad, that would be adversely impacted.
That's my recollection as well, Brian, but I just want to confirm that it's not blocking the access to the rear of the building. That would be.
And here's the thing, the conversation, again, these folks from CSX don't know me from Adam, and they don't have any reason not to be nice to me. But it was a perfectly professional conversation. What I didn't push them on is whether or not there is room to go beyond what those drawings showed. In other words, I think there is reason for CSX to at least have the potential to be as good a neighbor as possible. Now, I understand they have safety concerns and liability concerns, and so they've got to have somewhat of a buffer from the center of the train tracks, out for liability reasons. I didn't push them for exactly how much they might be willing to give beyond what they communicated and was set out in those drawings, mainly because I'm not going to have a negotiation where I don't know if I've got a partner. But I think if the and I hope that if the landowner shows some flexibility to enter into a leasing agreement, then the sands shift, and then we, I think, as a town, have the ability to put pressure on CSX to be as accommodating as possible for a business that's been in Southborough for a long time and whose interests we want to protect. But we need some cooperation to be able to do that.
Can I ask one other question, Marty?
Yep.
And Sam, you might know the answer to this, being as you were on a zoning board. Is there based on the number of seating capacity, aren't they required to have X number of parking spots? So if they lose parking spots, and again, Sam, I don't know if you know the answer to that, but you're probably the best one that might know.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head, Lisa. I thought it was maybe square footage instead of seats,
Okay.
but I could look at that.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I mean, this may be a moot point if they lose enough parking spots that it may not even be feasible. So I don't know.
Well, first, again, I'd like to see how many parking spots we can preserve, but we can't do that in a vacuum. So, all right, we'll put it on. And Karen needs, I talked to Karen as well, and she would like to be able to put out an RFP by the end of March. So I'll put this on the agenda again for March 2nd, and I will attempt to have a conversation between now and then with the landowner and see if there's some give here. I hope there is.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. That is my report on item 6C. Final item of the night is public comment round 2. Should I tell Mr. Litt we don't want to hear from him? He commented the first time, and our new rule is you can only public comment once. You got to pick the first one or the second one.
Well, you get 30 seconds.
Bring Mr. Litt over.
Sorry, I'm not looking for frequent flyer miles tonight. But I did want to loop back to provide a couple more words on this issue that I keep bringing up at the poll hearings. I walk sidewalks in town, and there are a fair number of places where you walk down the sidewalk and there's a telephone pole in the middle of the sidewalk because, the sidewalk has to go someplace and the pole has to go someplace, and the pole was there first. And so I really do think it's important, as a matter of policy, to avoid those situations as best we can as things change. So that's why I keep bringing it up. And I'm going to continue bringing it up. It would be better if the plans came to you so I didn't have to bring it up. And that's all I have to say for this evening.
Okay. Thanks, Tim. I don't see, you know what? I am going to, the people, I want, do folks mind if I see if Mr. Semino is willing to come in for a short conversation? Is that okay? Paul, do you mind? Or does he just leave his phone on and, no, there we go.
Vote on anything, I would say.
You're still muted, Paul. We can't hear you. I don't know if you're talking, but we can't hear you.
Marty, back up a quick second, Lisa. The parking requirements are 1 space for each 3 seats in a food service establishment, plus 1 per each employee. So there is a requirement for that might be worth investigating.
Okay.
Thank you, Sam.
Paul, are you able to, we've had, I don't know if, I hope it's not us, because there were a number of people who couldn't communicate with audio tonight, and I hope it's not something in our system that is preventing that. I don't know if you're trying to communicate with us. If you are, you're not being successful.
Still shows up as muted.
Maybe he just doesn't want to talk to us.
Yeah. All right. You know what? I'm gonna entertain a motion to adjourn then.
So move.
By Mr. Stivers.
Second. Sorry.
Seconded by Ms. Braccio. Discussion none. Ms. Braccio.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Mr. Shea.
Aye.
Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
Mr. Healy is aye. 9:38. Not too bad, folks.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good meeting. And again, thanks, Lisa, for a really nice job on the form.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Right.